Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top headlines. A wave of terror attacks hit the United States, with Trump highlighting security loopholes, calling the country a laughingstock. Later, President-elect's future senior director for counterterrorism, Sebastian Gorka, will be joining us. Visas and travel bans are sparking concern as Trump prepares to resume office, with the high-skill work visa in particular causing a rift in the MAGA camp. And the former Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, fired by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, has now resigned from the parliament. To our top story now. A wave of shocking events has rocked the US, from a car ramming attack in New Orleans to a Tesla Cybertruck explosion and a mass shooting in New York. First up, the New Orleans attack. Footage reveals the moments leading up to the deadly incident on Bourbon Street, which killed 15 and injuring many more on New Year's Eve. The attacker was a 42-year-old Army veteran from Texas. Caroline Malone reports from Washington.
Closed-circuit TV footage shows the lead-up to the horrific New Year's Eve attack in the French Quarter of New Orleans. Traffic is running around the area when suddenly a pickup truck accelerates off the main road and into a crowded street of revelers. Audio taken from emergency and first response teams illustrates the panic and chaos as people realise just how bad the situation is. The suspect has now been identified.
Good evening. I'm Shamsuddin Jabbar, property manager with Blue Meadow Property.
The FBI is leading an investigation which includes looking into potential terror links. It is known that Jabbar previously served in the US Army, including one deployment to Afghanistan.
The FBI also reported to me that mere hours before the attack, he posted videos on social media indicating that he was inspired by ISIS, expressing a desire to kill. The ISIS flag was found in his vehicle, which he rented to conduct this attack. Possible explosives were found in the vehicle as well, and more explosives were found nearby.
Police raided his home in Houston, Texas on New Year's Day. They continue to look for hints as to what might have radicalized him and if there were any accomplices. Back in New Orleans, there's a continued heavy security presence. An annual college American football game, the Sugar Bowl, due to take place on New Year's Day, has been postponed for 24 hours. Officials say they've done a security sweep of the stadium ahead of the game, which is expected to attract tens of thousands of people. The FBI has also appealed for tips from the public and for them to report any suspicious activity. Caroline Malone, Al Arabiya News, Washington.
Meanwhile, just a few hours after the New Orleans attack unfolded, another incident struck Las Vegas. That's as a Tesla Cybertruck filled with fuel canisters and fireworks exploded outside Trump's hotel, killing the driver and injuring 7 others. The FBI have said in the last hour the incident in New Orleans was a terrorist attack. For more, our reporter Caroline Malone joins us now from Washington, D.C. Caroline, good evening to you. Thank you for joining us. We just heard from the FBI in the last 30 minutes or so. What have they said? What's the update?
So the FBI Assistant Director has clarified that the overall number of dead is 15. 14 of those are victims of this horrible rampage attack. 1 is the suspect himself. They've also said that because of their tip hotline, which they put out in the early hours of yesterday, that they've had over 400 tips come into them about potential related activities to what happened in New Orleans in the early hours of New Year's Day. They said it's taken a while to get through all that evidence, but they encourage people to keep coming forward. In particular, anyone that may have been around the site of the attack, because that is where they found 2 coolers with IEDs inside, explosive devices that they have confirmed were in coolers on the street where the attack took place. So they're trying to piece together how those coolers ended up there. One important point to note, though, from the FBI is that they are now saying that Jabba acted alone. They are confirming it's a terrorist act and that they believe he acted alone. They believe in that case, presumably, that he was the one to put the coolers there with the IEDs, but they're asking for more witnesses to come forward to clarify when that happened. They've also spoken about the days leading up to the attack and what they have discovered with that regard. So Jabba driving from Houston, Texas, where he lived, a place that they've also searched now as well. He used this rental car, drove towards Louisiana and to New Orleans, and then carried out the attack. But in the few hours before the attack, between about 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. when the attack itself was carried out, he appears to have posted 5 videos on social media. And in those videos, he's talking about his concerns, and I'll quote exactly what he said in one of them here, about the war between the, quote, believers and disbelievers. So him talking about some of his potential motivations, perhaps, according to the FBI. It was also confirmed earlier from the FBI that this is a person who had worked for the US Army. He had been deployed once to Afghanistan. He was previously married. His ex-wife and him had 2 children, 2 daughters. And so police and FBI have been speaking to anyone connected to this incident, but really emphasizing they are still keen to get any evidence from anyone who was around at the site of that crime on New Year's Eve.
Caroline Malone in Washington, D.C., thank you for joining us with the latest on that incident in New Orleans. Authorities also mentioned that they were investigating whether it might be linked to President-elect Donald Trump, who owns the hotel, or Elon Musk, who owns Tesla.
Well, I mean, it's a Tesla truck, and we know that Elon Musk is working with President-elect Trump, and it's the Trump Tower, so there's obviously things to be concerned about there. Yes, actually, I have to thank Elon Musk specifically. He gave us quite a bit of additional information in regards to how the vehicle was locked after it exploded due to the force of the nature of the force from the explosion, as well as being able to capture all of the video from the Tesla charging stations. What I also would like you to pay attention to on that video, as you see that, it looks like the exterior of that truck is completely intact as it sits there. The fact that this was a cyber truck really limited the damage that occurred inside of the valet, because it had most of the blasts go up through the truck and out.
And now to the third incident that has shaken the US. 10 teenagers were injured in the first mass shooting of 2025 when a gunman opened fire outside a music venue in New York. The NYPD Chief of Patrol, Philip Rivera, has shared more details with reporters.
January 1st at approximately 11:18 p.m., the NYPD received multiple 911 calls for several people shot in front of an event space located here at 91-12 144th Place. Our initial investigation revealed that approximately 90 people were inside the location in an upstairs private event space. The venue was at capacity and a queue of about 15 people formed outside awaiting as other attendees exited. 4 males were walking eastbound on 91st Avenue onto 144th Place towards the venue. 3 to 4 males then opened fire over 30 times in the direction of the group standing outside the event space, striking multiple victims. The males fled on foot westbound on 91st Street towards 143rd Place, where they entered a light-colored sedan with out-of-state plates.
Now, commenting on the attacks, US President-elect Donald Trump says his country is breaking down and is a disaster and laughingstock all over the world after the deadly events. Trump has also linked the New Orleans attack to illegal immigration, the issue at the heart of his election victory. Meanwhile, a debate is raging in the US over incoming Trump administration stance on legal migration. The H-1B visa program, which allows foreign skilled workers the opportunity to settle in the country, has previously been criticized by Trump, but now he says he supports expanding on it. Elon Musk has received harsh criticism online from hardcore America First Republicans after he said he backed allowing more people to enter America on that particular visa program. Many Republicans are concerned the policy could suppress wages in critical sectors such as technology or in finance. During his first tenure, after just 1 week after he took office, Donald Trump implemented his controversial travel ban, barring people from Arab countries, triggering chaos at airports and sparking protests. Now, Trump's re-election has raised concerns about reinstating those similar measures. As a result, several U.S. universities are urging international students to return before his inauguration this month, fearing potential travel and visa restrictions. For more on this, I'd like to say I'm joined by David K. Johnson, the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and a professor at the Rochester Institute of Technology. Good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us. What do you make of this debate on skilled legal migration that is seemingly splitting Trump's base, and why are they so upset with this policy?
Well, there are two issues here. One of them is the immigration issue. There's a wing of the MAGA Republicans who don't want anyone coming into the country at all, or certainly not anyone they don't regard as a white Christian European. Donald Trump's assistant on these issues, who I've referred to as his Minister of Hate, Stephen Miller, has been very explicit about this. On the other side of this are the MAGA Republicans who want to get workers at lower wages who they can control. If you are in America on an H-1B visa, you are totally at the mercy of your employer. And if you're fired for any reason, you have about 2 months to find a job or you have to leave, which makes people very compliant. But there's a second issue here, and that is wages. By having more than about 400,000 people on H-1B visas who are paid less than Americans, there's an effort to push down wages in the high-tech sector. If the program were to be stopped or quickly phased out, wages would rise in that sector for American citizens. And that's the second part of this. I think Elon Musk's principal interest here has less to do with race, much as he has identified himself with racists, than with his commercial interests in trying to force down the cost of labor.
You've written several books on Donald Trump. You probably understand him pretty well by now, I'm sure. Why do you think he now supports this program, despite harshly criticizing it in the past? And do you think this is down to Elon Musk? Because we do know now that they've sort of got a bromance going on.
Well, I've covered Donald for 36 years. In fact, I wrote about him becoming president in 1988. And one of the key lessons to understand about Donald is that there are no underlying principles from which he operates. He's very mercurial. In fact, it's not unusual for Donald to say something, say the opposite within a minute, and then deny that he made the original comment. So Donald is a person who is at heart a con artist. Putting Donald Trump and policy in the same sentence or even paragraph is sort of an offense to the word policy. Donald does whatever he thinks is in his interest at the moment. As more and more people write about Elon Musk as the de facto president of the U.S., Eventually, that will cause Donald a great deal of stress and trouble. But right now, he's hewing very closely to Elon Musk, and I expect that will continue at least for a while.
Elon Musk has been, criticized heavily online for his support of this policy. What do you make of this apparent fragility of this relationship between key figures in the Trump administration and also their online followers? It seems to have created such a massive debate.
Well, one of the unusual things about MAGA Republicans under Trump is that there's only one kind of loyalty. It's loyalty to Donald, full stop. You didn't see a lot of leaking of information during the Biden or Obama administrations, for example, where people were quite loyal to their leader and they did their best to control their differences internally. But in Trump world, we've seen lots of fissures and arguments. And further compounding this, there are a number of House Republicans. The House is very lightly controlled by Republicans. They have about 4 extra votes to control the lower chamber of Congress. And in that group of Republicans are people who want to end all taxes, want to end all immigration, who want to repeal, undo Supreme Court decisions allowing same-sex marriage and other things. And then there's the mainstream, and then there's the traditional conservative Republicans. So they're really not set up to govern. And that's going to be one of the biggest challenges going forward, is not being ready and coordinated to govern. And at the top of this is Donald, who is a terrible manager. I mean, the reason I've documented all of his failed businesses, his opportunities to make millions of dollars that he blew, is because despite his image among the public, he's a terrible manager, and the principal job of a U.S. president is to be a manager.
Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. That's David K. Johnson, the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and professor at the Rochester Institute of Technology, who's been writing about Donald Trump since, well, for 36 years, longer than I've nearly been alive. David, thank you. Let's turn our attention to a developing political situation now in Israel. Yoav Gallant has quit from the country's parliament only a few months after he was fired from his role as defense minister by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Gallant has often disagreed with Netanyahu over the ongoing war in Gaza. He's also against exempting ultra-Orthodox Jewish men from serving in the military, a hot-button issue in the country and a position not shared by Israel's current leadership. Even in his resignation announcement, Gallant said he would not accept or support the military exemption bill.
As the former Minister of Defense, I am responsible for everything that happened, from the beginning of my position in the months before the war until the end of my position more than a year after the start of the war. In the last 2 months, since I was removed from the post of Minister of Defense, nothing has happened. The government of Israel, led by the Prime Minister and the Minister of Defense, has launched a recruitment drive that is contrary to the needs of the IDF and the security of the State of Israel. The bill is intended to grant an exemption from military service to most of the young people of the ultra-Orthodox sector. I cannot accept that, and I cannot be a party to that. The State of Israel was still and will always remain the mission of my life. I will be back.
Now returning back to our top story, the attacks in New Orleans. Details are still emerging about the attacker and his motivations, but questions remain over the security situation in the United States and whether ISIS could be on a resurgence. For more on this, I'm joined from Washington, D.C. by Sebastian Gorka, who is set to return to the White House to serve as President Trump's senior director for counterterrorism. Mr. Gorka, I appreciate you joining me this this evening. Thank you so much. What were your initial thoughts upon hearing the news from New Orleans and upon the confirmation that the attacker had an ISIS flag mounted on his vehicle?
Well, what we've been saying on the America First MAGA platforms for the last 4 years, the current feckless leadership of the Biden-Harris White House should not have been looking for so-called white supremacists and neo-Nazis amongst the U.S. military, as Lloyd Austin, the disgraced outgoing defense secretary, did. They should be looking for members of the global jihadi movement like this individual. So the threat has been encouraged, is recrudescent, thanks to the Biden surrender of Afghanistan and the collapse of Syria. So sadly, this was to be expected, especially when the FBI has become, under the Biden administration, a political arm of the Democrat Party, tracking down Catholics because they go to Latin Mass in Richmond and hunting down grandmothers who prayed in Congress on January the 6th instead of actually tracking down real terrorists like this individual.
What do you think this attack has shown about the security situation in the United States, and what are you going to do about it when you come into office?
Well, it's demonstrated that we have a woke national security system. It is left-wing. It has been ideologically perverted. I mean, start with the fact that the borders were literally dismantled from what we put in place under the first Trump administration. According to the Biden administration statistics, 8 million illegals were let into this country. Those are the ones that we know of, scores of them on the terror watch list. If you add the getaways, people who weren't ever intercepted by any kind of federal authority, you can probably double that to 16 million. And what are we going to concentrate on? Well, look, President Trump has the best possible national security team. Former Green Beret, Mike Waltz, my boss, coming in as national security advisor. Kash Patel at the FBI, a former DOJ terrorism prosecutor, former chief of staff of the Pentagon, former acting deputy director of national intelligence, Governor Noem as secretary of Homeland Security, Tom Homan as the border czar, nobody better to be the border czar, and then Stephen Miller as deputy chief of staff for all matters concerning immigration. So we will be very busy because of the threat that has been engendered by this administration. But President Trump will have one priority above everything else: to make sure that Americans, all of them, whether they voted for him or not, are safe as soon as he puts his hand up and swears his second oath of office to become the 47th president of the United States.
Sebastian, you've just outlined there the strong team you have coming in. Donald Trump has said the attack was because of illegal immigration, but the suspect was born and raised in Texas. He served for the U.S. Army for a long time, from 2006 to 2015. This appears to have been a homegrown threat, not an immigration one. Was Trump's assessment completely wrong here?
Absolutely not. It was absolutely on the money. As Stephen Miller has incredibly well illuminated right after that statement by the president, we never had an indigenous jihadi problem in America. We don't have biker gangs who are jihadists. This is an imported issue. The global jihadi movement is around the planet. The idea that this person was somehow radicalized by himself in a basement is absolutely garbage. This is a global threat to Western civilization and was imported into the country. Whether or not you were born here or not is irrelevant. Somebody who is part of the global jihadi movement made sure that person was radicalized.
Trump has slammed the Democrats over the New Orleans attack and says the country is breaking down. But I just want to get to what differences are going to happen, because basically the police and the FBI was saying that this suspect was not known to them. How are you going to break through those circles?
What do you mean not known to them? Of course they weren't known to them. What were they doing? They were hunting down Catholics for going to Latin Mass. They were hunting down, think of this, the FBI and the DOJ recently imprisoned a beautiful black mother of a 3-year-old girl because she peacefully protested outside a Planned Parenthood abortion clinic in New York. She just received a 35-month sentence. That's why you don't find terrorists, because you become a political arm, a police Gestapo-like organization for left-wing ideologues in the Democrat Party. You've used the FBI to raid Mar-a-Lago, the president's residence, at gunpoint. You've arrested Peter Navarro, former assistant to the president at Ronald Reagan Airport, because he is, what, in contempt of Congress? They missed this because the FBI is not a law enforcement entity under the Democrats. It is an armed Gestapo wing of the Democrat Party. And that's why we need people like Kash Patel to reform it back into a law enforcement entity.
Sebastian, during his first term, Donald Trump passed an executive order which critics called the Muslim ban because it targeted people living in mostly Muslim countries and prevented entry into the United States. Trump says this was to prevent terrorism, but we know the Biden administration did revoke this in 2021. Do you think this will be reinstated, and which countries could be targeted if so?
It's incredible that 8 years later you are regurgitating fake news garbage. If it were about Islam, don't you think we would have included the most populous Muslim nation on the planet in that list of nations? Do you even know what the most populous Muslim nation in the world is?
I don't know. Nigeria.
Yeah, clearly. Yeah, no, it's Indonesia. It's Indonesia. Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much for that.
With Islam. You're welcome. You're welcome. We did the travel moratorium, not a Muslim ban, the travel moratorium based upon a threat assessment we inherited from the Obama administration, which stated to us 7 nations, including Iraq and Afghanistan, were incapable of verifying to us that the people coming from their nations to America weren't terrorists and weren't a threat to our nation. Based upon the Obama threat assessment, President Trump absolutely correctly said, stop. These countries cannot send their citizens to America unless we have fidelity in terms of the information on these human beings coming into our territory. Had nothing to do with religion. And whether or not President Trump will reenact some kind of limitation for nations who are sending their citizens here is up to the president. It is his prerogative as the chief executive to control the movement of any foreigner into the United States, and he will do so based upon whether or not there is an extant threat from those countries.
Sebastian, you didn't answer my question. Will you reinstate the ban, yes or no?
I said he will do whatever it takes.
Will you reinstate the ban? Simple yes or no answer.
Am I the president?
Well, you gave me a history lesson, so you might know.
What's that got to do with the president?
OK, let's move on. There's no definitive answer on that. I want to just go back to what you were saying a little bit earlier. Is this terror attack that we saw in New Orleans a dangerous turning point for the US and its allies? In your opinion, are we witnessing the resurgence of ISIS? What do you think is actually going on? You spoke about Syria there, you spoke about Afghanistan. What's happening?
It's not a serious turning point. The trouble is the seriousness and the utter paucity of any serious national security function for the last 4 years. It's not one incident. It's not the tragic murder of 15 innocent Americans on Bourbon Street. No, it is the fact that for 4 years, we had no national security. We had open borders. What nation has open borders? We had a Chinese balloon fly across the whole of our country, especially over sensitive military sites. There was no national security function. It was politics. It was get Trump. It was undermine conservatives, surveil them, ban their bank accounts, use the DOJ, use the intelligence community. That's the problem. Not one event, 4 years.
Just on another point that I want to talk to you, the US government have said they will remain in Syria as long as there's an ISIS threat, something they've been concerned about for a while. Do you think this event will make a withdrawal from Syria less likely?
You mean the Biden administration has said that?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, we had an election and 77 million Americans said, "You're fired," to Joe Biden. President Trump is coming back. And why was President Trump elected? He was elected to secure our borders and to stop stupid wars. The same reason that he was elected in 2016. President Trump is about America first. Not America alone, America first. It is interesting, for 4 years, the world was stable. There were no new wars. My former and future boss left office, and what happened? Ukraine was invaded. Afghanistan surrendered by Biden. 1,200 innocent Jews were murdered by jihadis on October the 7th, and Syria collapses. President Trump is coming back because people want stability and safety. That's what we want, and we don't want interminable forever wars.
There's just one other issue I want to ask you about before I let you go, Sebastian. Elon Musk has called on the UK to release Tommy Robinson, the founder of the English Defence League. He's currently in prison for contempt of court in this long-running libel case. Do you think he should be freed?
Nothing to do with my portfolio, and that's an irrelevant question.
OK, absolutely fine. I want to say thank you so much for giving me a really good history lesson and a very dynamic interview. Sebastian Gorka, who will serve as President Trump's Senior Director for Counterterrorism. I really appreciate you joining us this evening.
Happy New Year.
And now we're going to go back to Tel Aviv, where our correspondent Trent Murray has more on Israel's former defence chief's resignation.
Well, Yoav Gallant was sacked as Israel's defence minister back in November by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. But until now, he had kept his seat in Israel's parliament. But in the past 24 hours, we have seen him make that official announcement that he is now quitting Parliament, leaving frontline politics altogether, for now at least, releasing a statement in which he said, just as it is on the battlefield, so it is in public service. There are moments in which one must stop, assess and choose a direction in order to achieve their goals, signalling there he is indeed quitting politics. Now, despite coming from the same political grouping as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he really did clash quite publicly with the Prime Minister at times, really culminating in his dismissal in November. One hot-button issue for him was the long-running exemptions that exist for ultra-Orthodox Jewish men from joining the conscript IDF army. Now, he certainly believes that they should have to do that they shouldn't have an exemption, but he often would butt heads with both the Prime Minister and also some of those religious far-right party leaders that currently make up that coalition government led by Netanyahu. Yoav Gallant, though, is also a politician with his own controversies. He oversaw the large lion's share of the war in Gaza. The International Criminal Court has an arrest warrant out for him and Prime Minister Netanyahu. It is not thought that by leaving politics that arrest warrant issue will go away. But more broadly on the war in Gaza, many discussions taking place here right now around the state of play with ceasefire negotiations. Certainly in recent weeks there had been some growing optimism that maybe Israel and Hamas were close to signing a deal which would have seen a ceasefire put in place in order to get some of those Israeli hostages back home. But the mood seems to really have shifted now in the past few days. Israeli media are reporting that there are currently no negotiations taking place between them and Hamas, either in Cairo or in Doha, where much of these talks have been concentrated in recent months. But something that will probably make some minds start to be concentrated here is the return of former President Donald Trump. He, of course, is a president that is highly unpredictable, highly unorthodox when it comes to Middle East policy, and he has certainly publicly said he wants to see a deal done by the time he gets back to the White House. Trent Murray for Al Arabiya News, Tel Aviv.
Let's take a look at some other news stories from around the world. Syria's top diplomat, Foreign Minister Assad Hassan al-Shabani, says he hopes to open a new bright page with Saudi Arabia. Al-Shabani and his delegation are on their first visit to the kingdom following the ousting of former Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia has launched a humanitarian air bridge to Syria. 2 planes carrying food, shelter and medical supplies landed in Damascus on Wednesday. The total aid provided by Saudi to the Syrian people from 2011 to the end of 2024 has amounted to around $860 million. Now, with just a few weeks left in his term, US President Joe Biden plans to award fierce critics of Donald Trump, Liz Cheney and Benny Thompson a service medal. This comes after the incoming president warned that the former Republican congresswoman could be in a lot of trouble with the law once he takes office. Meanwhile, Thompson was one of the lawmakers who led the investigation into the US deadly Capitol riots by Donald Trump supporters. China has sanctioned 10 US defense firms over arms sales to Taiwan. The US firms were added to China's unreliable entities list. They will be prohibited from import and export activities or making new investments in China. Last Friday, China sanctioned 7 US military industrial companies, including the Boeing subsidiary Institute. Jeju Air CEO banned from leaving South Korea. That's what we're hearing. The chief executive of South Korean airline Jeju Air has been banned from leaving the country after one of the company's planes crashed last week, killing 179 people. Earlier today, South Korean police have raided the offices of Jeju Air and the operator of Maung Airport as they step up a probe into that fatal crash in South Korea. Elon Musk has called for the release of Tommy Robinson from prison, one of Britain's best-known far-right agitators. Accused of fueling last summer's riots, Robinson was jailed in October after he admitted committing contempt of court over a long-running libel case involving a Syrian refugee. Musk claimed that Robinson was in solitary confinement for telling the truth and that he should be freed. The tech billionaire has been involved in ongoing feuds with the Labour government since it did take office last year. A reminder of our top stories tonight. A wave of terror attacks hit the United States, with Trump highlighting security loopholes, calling the country a laughingstock. Later, President-elect's future Senior Director for Counterterrorism, Sebastian Gorka, will join us. I must tell you, he has joined us, and it was a very dynamic interview, so do make sure you tune in for that. Meanwhile, visas and travel bans are sparking concern as Trump prepares to resume office, with the high-skill work visa in particular causing a rift in the MAGA camp. And the former Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, fired by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, has now resigned from Parliament. And that's all from us on W News. Thank you so much for joining us. Hadley Gamble is coming up next. And don't miss Tom Burges Watson with GNT. Good night and have a lovely evening.
Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Arabiya News.
It's very impressive.
Where knowledge meets perspective.
Naguib Sawiris, thank you so much for joining Al Arabiya.
Always a pleasure, Had.
I want to get a sense of where Naguib sees the world today.
I think the world is in a very dangerous mode because of the rise of new dictators in different jurisdictions who have consolidated power in one person. That includes the US, by the way, what's upcoming. And when there is a lack of accountability or a lack of, I don't know how the Senate and the Congress will deal in America with the new president.
Do you see him as a dictator, Donald Trump?
He's the democratic form of dictator. Yes, I see him as a dictator. I mean, this is what he would love to have. So now if he has the Senate and the Congress, we're going to see, you know. But the Chinese president is a dictator. The Indian prime minister is a dictator, in my opinion. There is lots of other dictators in our region. So the world is being trapped through these individuals now that are shaping world destiny. Putin is a dictator. So all these powerful dictators, because of their countries, can do something crazy or stupid, and we end up, now Russia is sending ballistic rockets to Ukraine. So if we're going to escalate, you know, I mean, it could end up very, very badly. You know, you don't control these individuals. If they give an order, they live because they are dictators. So the people around them just do what they tell them.
Yeah, you're not risk averse when it comes to working in countries under essentially dictatorships. You've worked in North Korea, you've worked elsewhere, the opportunities.
No, I don't try to mix my political views with my business, you know. But I have a passion to go places where I have a soft spot for, you know, like I feel like I want to do something which will be remembered. I would go to a country that nobody wants to go because I want to build something that has never been built before. So when I'm not there after many years and I die, they say, well, there was this Egyptian investor, he came here, he promised he will do 1, 2, 3, and he did 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and did something great. So I get well remembered. And
but you don't shy away.
No, I never shy away. You know, you see, I fear nothing and nobody, and except God. You know, so people think sometimes I'm crazy, and I try to explain to them it's not being brave. It's about my faith. You know, I believe God is on my side, so nobody can stand in my way.
What do you think about the situation in the region today?
Also very bad, very sad everywhere. You see, we still have problems in Libya divided between two sections, and there's still some uncertainty. You have Syria with uncertainty, and 3, 4 other countries meddling in Syrian affairs. Look at Lebanon, what's happening now with the destruction of Lebanon, this beautiful country with beautiful people. They're paying a price for some military force that took over Lebanon by force and ignoring all the facts of Sudan, a disaster. The two fractions are having a war where they know no one will win. So they'll keep just breaking down, destroying, and who's paying the price? The civilian people who are now 18 million stranded. There's hunger threats. And one party is also very, how can I say, very stubborn.
You're invested in Sudan, right?
Yes. Yeah. No, you name it, wherever there are problems, you find me there.
There you are. There you are. Tell me this, when you take a step back and think about the media landscape, for example, Comcast has decided to offload CNBC, MSNBC, several of the brands that were under their umbrella. They've moved away from cable, in a sense. How do you see this all evolving?
You see, media is a very difficult business. Very difficult to make money in media. Usually, you guys, you take your salaries, you take your bonuses, we pay for cost and everything. When it comes to income, now what is the income? Advertising is coming totally down. Social media now is taking over. So, no income. For Comcast, the original idea was to buy content. So they thought this is content. Now they see that it has changed completely.
With Peacock, yeah.
Yes, exactly. So I see
it's difficult to stay ahead in that.
I see that media will lose influence. Digital, social media will take over. So whoever didn't do the shift is going to suffer, you know.
So in the interest in purchasing legacy assets like CNBC or MSNBC?
No. They're dying assets.
Yeah. And
also because we started a platform here, a digital platform for the young people, the young millennials, you know, the people who want to understand how to become an entrepreneur, how to be able to get money if you're from venture capitalists, you know, how to advance, what are the main exciting new areas in business, you know. So all these other traditional stations, they're still with the stock exchange and the reviews of the companies and like that, you know, they haven't.
They're not interactive.
They haven't evolved.
Walk me through this one. When you see tweets from Elon Musk, perhaps jokingly suggesting he might purchase MSNBC. Do you see that happening?
I don't know, but he's not been known. I mean, I thought when he bought Twitter that this was a very bad investment, you know. And look what he's done, you know, so you never know. I mean, look, the guy is a genius. And if you don't like him, then there's something wrong about you, not about him.
Do you think it's worrying, the relationship he has, the bromance he has with Donald Trump? Or was it inevitable?
No, it's actually interesting to show you how we can turn tables. You see, we capitalists or entrepreneurs, we also like people to understand our value. So when you go against us, okay, you have to be prepared for a fight, see, because we are more imaginative. And what's an entrepreneur? He has an imagination, he has fantasy, but he has also the might of persistence. So you want to go to war against someone like us? Be my guest, you know, him or me or anyone else.
You're based at least part of the time here in Dubai. You've grown your business here. Where are the opportunities that you see?
Dubai and Abu Dhabi and the Emirates, you smell the money in the air. You see, I mean, opportunities are immense here. And tell me why. Because there is no interference. If you're an honest businessman and you have a good idea and you have a plan and you'll obey by the rules, you're so welcomed here. The ease of doing business, the ease of traveling in and out, the ease of administrative issues. There's no place in the world like here, you know. And I believe Saudi Arabia is going in the right way, and they will achieve what these people are here, but they need to be faster because people here will not stop advancing. You know, the rulers here, they wake up in the morning with one thought only: what can we do better for our people and for our guests or for our, you see? So and they sit and they come up with a new idea, with a new action, and then they execute. Where else? You know, most other countries, people are entangled in their routine meetings with some ambassador or some visitors or some crisis in the region or this and that. Here, nothing is stopping the progress, you know.
Where else would you invest? Because you're always looking for new opportunities. What's interesting to you? Would you put money in a place, for example, like Russia?
No, I will not put money in Russia because I'm standing with Ukraine, clearly. You see, I think what Putin should have done is he should have told them, look, guys, don't go into NATO because we believe this is a security threat to ourselves, you know. And if you go, I will come in. I will march in, and it will be war. I think the Ukrainians would have taken his words seriously, and they would have delayed this issue with the NATO, you know, and we would have prevented the war. But he didn't do that. He just woke up one day and decided, now I'm marching in.
Yeah.
He says, well, we tried, and this. No, he didn't put it in a clarity like that. It's like, okay, because he has to acknowledge the fact that it's Ukraine's right to decide who they want to join and what they want to do. So he had to put a very serious message first. What was he worried about? That they will make defenses and prepare? And like, you see, he tried to invade Kiev in the first weeks of the war, and before the whole world helped Ukraine, and they stood strong because it was their national honor, you know. So I would not do that. I will never.
Money done in Ukraine?
Yes, of course.
What looks interesting to you there? Because they need investment
Post-war,
in every
everything.
sector. Yeah.
Everything.
Energy, infrastructure.
Everything. There's everything there. Hospitality, hotels, there's a lot of mining, still many mining opportunities now, and with all this.
So is it more interesting to look at a place like Ukraine than Western Europe?
No, there's just more money to be made. In Western Europe, the competition is higher. Everything is already too regulated. Everything is done. There is a big giant companies that will compete against you. I mean, you have to go where you, as a businessman coming from Egypt with limited resources, can do something and not have too much competition.
Do you worry about the future of Europe?
Yes, I worry. I criticize this Brexit departure of the UK. I mean, what's one of the most stupidest decisions in the history of mankind? They were part of Europe. They're a necessary part of Europe because also Europe has the same enemies, has the same challenges. What the hell did they go out like that? They lost all the investors from other countries. They lost their manpower. Now when you go in restaurants or they tell you, sorry, we have to work only a few days because we can't find the manpower. Now you have to get a visa at the airport to export goods. I mean, it is the most... And a decision like that should have been obtained by absolute majority, which means above 70% or above, not by 51%, which means it was the most ridiculous decision ever.
Would you invest under a Labour government?
No.
Or Keir Starmer's government? Why?
Because they started on the wrong, they started with taxes and taxation and expelling the foreigners by cancelling the...
Putting business out of business.
Yeah, no.
Not a thing.
No.
And in Europe more generally?
I like Greece. Yeah. I like Greece because it's in Europe, but it has some resemblance to our world, and the people are very nice. And I like Italy. I invested in Italy. My biggest investment in my whole career was in Italy, I bought wind for 15 billion euros, I mean, in the history of LBOs or investments, it's the highest from one individual,
Tell me this. When you look at what's happening in the market today, you're a huge proponent of gold. Where do you see that headed?
You see, we had this question 4 years when you had
we did indeed.
Interview.
And everybody thought you were crazy.
And where did it go now? It's at 2,700, I mean, I was right because it's based on my experience in the mining industry. New gold mines take 6-7 years to start producing from the day you start exploration, which means that the velocity of new mines coming into production is much slower than the consumption. Coupled with the tensions in the world now, and so the Russians and the Chinese are massing up their gold reserves. Why? Because it's a universe currency. They don't want to be hostage to the dollar. Okay? So under this demand is here, it's going very fast, and the offering is very slow. And gold is gold.
Yeah. You mentioned hostage to the dollar. How worrying is a Trump administration in your mind, whether it be with regards to the Fed or the Trump tariffs?
I think we are going to be entertained in the next 4 years massively because you will have a disruptor, which is Donald Trump. And if he disrupts in the right areas, like I like his disruption for the administration. Because in America, the bureaucracy and the administration, and mostly fueled by the Democrats.
You're not surprised they lost?
No, I was not surprised they lost because, look at it, very, very simple. Biden should have left 6 months or a year earlier. She was not the most perfect candidate to be chosen. She was chosen in a hasty manner. She didn't present her case very well at all, in my personal opinion. So they were going to lose anyhow. If they would have put someone like Bill Clinton or that caliber or George Bush the father, they would have won if they would characters like that, But they came up with a very bad candidate in the last minute. Yes. Of course they lose.
Do you think it was the woke?
Because Donald Trump would have had a lot of people who don't like him. So this would have worked for them,
The woke narrative that we have to be politically correct. Do you think that is over?
She should have woke up, Not she was in another planet. I mean, I I was looking at her and thinking, oh my God, that's imagine this. She will be a president of the United States of America. I mean, America always surprises me with their last candidates. Always, they don't manage to get really the very bad choices at the end. But no, I think you can say things. She had something also working against her. She was there for 4 years. What can she show for? Zero.
Yeah. Tell me this. When you think about business and politics, it was once explained to me by a friend of ours, if you have the money, you want the power, and if you have the power, you want the money. Businessmen going into politics, does that work?
Very bad idea. You know, I used to admire and love the late Prime Minister of Lebanon, Rafiq Hariri. And I was in a conference here in Dubai where he attended with Sheikh Mohammed and the others in front, and it was about was a financial conference or so mixed, you know. So I made a statement, said, why don't you leave the Palestinian problem to the businessmen? We can solve it, you know, instead of the politicians who failed over these years to provide peace. And after I finished, he called me and told me, Naguib, don't do my mistake. Don't go into politics if you're because you're a successful businessman. Don't go into politics. 1 week before he was assassinated.
Really?
So I took the advice very seriously. I make my opinions. I'm opinionated, you know. I can't sit tight and not say when I see something wrong, especially when it concerns my country, okay? Or when it concerns a country I love, like Lebanon or any other place, you know. But it's a bad idea.
Yeah. Speaking of Lebanon, how do you see this playing out for the Lebanese? Because the United States has essentially greenlit everything that Israel's done.
I think Israel has done a big mistake in the way they handled this crisis of the terror attack of October 7, you know, because I think when they will sit back and they see they've alienated a lot of the people in the world who have a conscience. You can't kill 42,000 people and feel that we will not sympathize with the Palestinian people, you know, like we sympathize with the victims of October 7. You know, this was a dreadful. But if you don't want me to deny the Holocaust, I cannot deny also, and I hate people who deny the Holocaust. You don't deny that there are 42,000 innocent people died. You didn't get the bad guys. The bad guys, how many of these 42,000 people were Hamas? 14,000 children were in Hamas, so they were not. So you can't prevent the world of feeling sorry for this immense victim, even if you are friendly to Israel, you know. So I believe the American administration has not tried to put some sanity into the situation. Look at now, the hostages are not back. Gaza is totally ruined. 40,000 people died. Now they're destroying in Lebanon, you know. And now they will stop before Hezbollah is finished. So they will stop and leave Hezbollah still there. So,
which was supposedly the point.
Yeah, so I don't know.
For Lebanon.
But Netanyahu also.
Do you think that that was a correct ruling by the International Criminal Court?
It stands for the 42,000 innocent souls that died. Yeah. The question is, you want to get the bad guys? Get the bad guys. You are intelligent, you have technology, you showed it your technology in Lebanon, you know. So why do you make what we call a general punishment? You know? The people of Gaza were occupied by Hamas. The simple people not all the people in Gaza wanted Hamas or accepted Hamas. Because Hamas was a dictatorial power on the people there. They didn't allow them to voice any other opinion. If you were not with them, they would take you and drag you and jail you with no. So the people were also oppressed. So you killed the oppressed people.
Yeah. What happens next in your mind? Does Trump come into office and put an end to wars? Or is the Middle East beyond his abilities?
No, it's not beyond, because he will have a lot of influence on the Arab countries. But he has a tendency to think that everything will be solved through money and business, you know, which is not right, because he forgets that people have now hate inside them. People have nationalistic feelings about their land, you know. You can't offer me money to, and you will take my home, you know. So I think he's made a statement which is, in my personal opinion, ridiculous, saying Israel should be bigger. On whose account? On our account. Let them come and take 1 centimeter from Egypt. We will go to war. Nobody, doesn't understand the sovereign right of your land. So you want to be bigger in where? You go to the sea, then maybe they can put some more land in the sea.
Dredging. What about Egypt today?
Yeah, Egypt is not to what I would like it to be, you know. It's not to what I would like it to be, you know.
What needs to change?
I mean, this is a bit of that's where I get into trouble, you know, with questions like that. So I don't want to say, but I say we need more freedom. We need to support the private sector and open the doors completely. We need to eliminate the competition of the public sector and the army and the business. We need to restore the political life by allowing real elections and real
debate, real conversation.
We need a parliament that is not based on interest groups or people who paid money to become an MP. There's a lot of changes are needed, you know.
Do you imagine we'd be talking about these things 10 years ago in terms of the future of Egypt?
Well, to be honest, nobody expected when we got the Muslim Brotherhood out of Egypt and we welcomed President Sisi that this is going to be the way forward. That has happened, you know.
Yeah. And it's disappointing.
You said it. You say that.
Walk me through Monify. Tell me what this platform's all about. What led you to this? I know originally you were thinking...
So Monify is I always wanted to have a financial station or a platform, but that is unique. That is not going against CNBC or Bloomberg because we don't have the budget anyhow. But that we...
And linear may be over.
Sorry? Of course, yeah. And that's why you had to go and cater for the young generation, the millennials, and see what they like, what are they interested in, and most of them, they would like to be an entrepreneur. They would like to start their own business. So what this station is going to do is going to tell them, where are the future investment opportunities? Is it in space? Is it in digital or Bitcoin or where? And how to start their businesses, how to approach venture capital companies, and
it also gives you a leg up yourself because you're seeing these companies at the most nascent.
Yes, and also me, I'm very interested into promoting the youth. I never refuse an opportunity to speak to the young people, to explain to them, take their questions and give them advice. So now I will have a platform that will do exactly that, you know. It's just in the beginning now. We're going to add on it, you know. We have to introduce artificial intelligence into it to reduce our cost. We have to do a newsroom, you know, that is different. We have to see also how we will get some income, because now the advertising income is not really a main source now. So we have to be very innovative how we can do an interaction with our viewers and get some money out of that relation. Yes, something like that, yeah.
Yeah. Tell me this.
It's difficult.
No doubt. Tell me this, though. What inspired you to do this?
As I told you, I'm in times of my life now where I want to give back to society. So my family, we have a very big social organization called the Sawiris Foundation. It spends, I think, 1 to 2 billion pounds a year into Egypt, trying to create jobs, help all the NGOs that are providing jobs or training or medical or education. So this is good, and it's an institution, okay? But because I am egocentric a bit, you know, so I want to do something that would be named after me, like a great good deed. So I consider that one of them. In the same thing, I think that the Emirates here, they need a new financial station, because the stock markets here are now booming, especially in Abu Dhabi now with all the restructuring that has, the brilliant restructuring that has happened, you know. So I believe we are in the right spot, and then we're in a place here where ease of doing business is clear. Everything is very easy here, you know. We got our license like that, everything.
Yeah. You mentioned AI. When you look at technology today, and of course it's developing rapidly, what in your mind is going to be the challenge there? Because I do so often stories about energy using AI.
Yeah, people have talked a lot about that. The challenges are clear. You're going to not need half of your manpower. People will lose their jobs. So what's the plan for these people? Okay. The other problem is the misuse. You will have more of now fake news through AI. You will be able to imitate the voice, the look. So whom will we believe when we see now a video in 5 years? Is it true? It's not true. How about criminality? I mean, I go ChatGPT. How can I rob a bank? Or you know, how can I open a safe model so and so and so? Imagine if it gives you the answer. Yeah. So easy. Everything is going to be easier. Even fraud, corruption, criminality, everything. So it's a very dangerous era we're going to go in. You know. So unless there will be it will be regulated, and there will going to be laws that tell you what you can do and what you cannot do.
Is that going to require some kind of global understanding, like we had in the internet?
Yes, exactly.
Early days,
exactly.
Bill Clinton.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Tell me this. Okay, so beyond AI, beyond the technology of everything, what's exciting to you? Is it the fact that you're actually a DJ?
Yeah, you will laugh, but when I DJ, I love music. Yeah. So it's moments.
I sing you dance. Yes.
Moments of my happiness. Yeah. I love music. And when I DJ, I know I have a good taste in the choice of the music I choose.
Yes.
And I see the response of people. It just puts me alive. It makes me feel alive, you know. And maybe you don't know, but I never grew over 30 years. I never grew up.
So is that your advice? Don't grow up.
Don't grow up, because it's stupid to grow up.
Yeah.
You know, if you keep a young spirit like I think I have, I never grow up, and I don't want to grow up. I prefer to go out with the age group where I stopped growing up, 30s. That's my favorite age group.
Love it. Cheers to that.
Thank you.
Naguib Sawiris, thank you so much for joining Al Arabiya.
Thank you, Adli.
From the White House to Gaza, Kyiv to Beijing, elections, economics and the environment compete with conflicts and other complex issues for our attention. In an age of fake news, deepfake and artificial intelligence,
they've got to have a vote and a say.
It's important to look beyond the loudest voice to understand the truth. From newsmakers to groundbreakers,
My campaign is going very well.
Presidents, prime ministers, princes and peacemakers, and cultural tastemakers.
As Arabs, as Middle Eastern, we're too emotional.
Join me on the Riz Khan Show for empowering conversation.
Hello and welcome to Al Arabiya News. I'm your host, Michal Prendergast. I'm thrilled to say I'm joined by the star of Shark Tank USA and millionaire investor, Kevin O'Leary. So, Kevin, the world has been shocked about the return of Donald Trump. Are you shocked?
No. The Democratic Party lost its way. They're no longer in touch with the electorate. There was a certain arrogance they had, and I think the problem started when Biden left the ticket, because in the democratic process, usually you have a convention, and so you start from scratch, and that process weeds out any weakness in candidates. If they have an inability to articulate their position, for example, or they're not able to debate their colleagues or whatever. But the other advantage of the convention, and there's been many very famous conventions back as far as the 40s, 50s, and 60s, is that the party realigns itself with a new message because it's trying to figure out what's the best candidate for the times. And they also get a tremendous amount of press, almost 5-6 weeks of press. That's not what happened here. What occurred was, I don't know if you want to call them the party elite, but the Pelosi's, the Schumers, the Obama,
the deep
even
state,
some movie stars, you know, they said, well, we're going to anoint Harris. And that was a mistake because Harris, while a very fine person, I'm sure, has never won anything. And last time she tried this, she didn't get a single delegate. So in 2020, in 2019 she failed, 2020 she failed again in 2024. The analogy I think that is best serving this thing is the Super Bowl of all political contests on earth is the American presidential election. There's no greater political event on earth. And if your quarterback gets injured, which is what Biden was, you don't put in a new quarterback that's never played a game, ever won one, ever. They got shellacked, and they've learned an important lesson. I looked at that map, the electoral map, while covering the election. It was turning redder than a lobster being boiled. I mean, he just took the nation. And I think they're doing a little soul searching now. But they had it coming to them. And as I like to say, Trump did them a huge favor. He actually helped that party. They don't know it yet, but they're going to have to take a spatula to it and scrape all of those candidates away and start from scratch with new leadership. They'll be a very competitive party. There's a lot of talent in the Democratic Party that never got a chance to compete. Now they will.
Yeah, and speaking of Donald Trump, I've heard you say every Democrat has to thank him for saving American entrepreneurship and the American economy.
Yeah, the concept, some of the ideas being proposed, specifically taxing unrealized gains, that's un-American. The idea of price controls, Soviet-style price controls, that's un-American. The focus on gender identity was not the #1 concern of people that can't even afford chicken on their kitchen table. So when you get that lost, the system corrects itself, and that's exactly what happened. That's the amazing thing about democracy. When you try and stretch it too far in any direction, boom, it self-corrects. Now, you happen to be in the way of the self-correction, you get decimated, and that's what happened to that party.
Yes, and the effect of social media has been really interesting. Obviously, Elon Musk has played a huge part. Obviously, he paid $44 billion. Do you see that as a good investment in the future of free speech?
Well, as an investment, it wasn't a good investment because it's valued now at $11 to $12 billion. But that doesn't matter. What he did do is keep alive the concept of free speech, because in a democracy, you're always dealing with 2.5% lunatic fringe. The cost of freedom of speech is the lunatic fringe. The minute you try and shut down the lunatic fringe, you're moving away from the concept freedom of speech. Everybody has a voice. You may not like what they say, but because they're part of the narrative, that is the core and the DNA of democracy. And so many ideas get tested, some get thrown out. And when you try and change that, again, the system self-corrects, and that's what happened here. So it's a very divided country now. We are going to have a new president with a full mandate. I mean, it looks like he's going to win the Senate and the House and the presidency. You can get a lot done for the first 2 years when you control everything. And so that's what's going to happen.
And obviously Trump in his first 4 years, it might have been called a little inexperienced. I think this time he won't mess around.
Well, he's actually signaled the market that he intends to hire seasoned veterans, AAA players that don't have a mandate to go in the White House and write a book 6 weeks later after they're fired. He doesn't want that. He doesn't want a rotating door anymore. He wants A players, and he's grooming his, he's got some very interesting people working on the inside to find the right people for every single position in cabinet. And I think it's going to be a fantastic government because it's going to focus on what the people want. They want security at the border. They've already said that. They want a reduction in inflation. The way you do that is you reduce energy costs. They want to strip away all the regulatory environment that the Biden administration put on. $1 trillion worth of burdensome regulation. He will tear that off like a Band-Aid, rip it right off, and the economy, as you can see, indexed by the market, the buoyancy that happened as soon as they figured out that he was going to be president, was pretty happy with that outcome. This is good for business. And when the economy is buoyant and people are getting employed, it's good for everybody. So, you know, the Democrats are licking their wounds, but in 6 weeks, everybody forget about it, and we'll move on. It'll be a great thing for everybody. I think the U.S. is in a renaissance period. And I'm not really shilling for politicians. I never do that. I shill for policy. I care about policy. I care about entrepreneurship. I care about investing. I care about the American dream. I'm an ambassador for it. I want that to work because my family, is American and they're working in the U.S. I want the best we can get for that country every day. And this is how you do it.
And speaking in terms of efficiency, Elon Musk has famously, he got rid of 85% of Twitter, and it's still running pretty flawlessly. There's been a lot of speculation that he might get the Secretary of State for Government Efficiency. Would you like to see that? What could someone like Elon Musk do in terms of saving tax dollars?
I don't think he'll take an actual specific role in cabinet. I think what he will do is be a consultant for the American people, identify inefficiencies, and get the whacking stick out. I love that idea. I love the idea that we've never really scraped the fat out of the federal government, and it's big, porky, fat, dripping with opportunity to cut. But the only way you can do that is you need a mandate from the top dog, the president, because no agency wants to be downsized. You walk in saying, I want to fire a third of you. They're not going to help you. But he'll identify opportunity. I call it release the hounds, because what taxpayer, regardless of what your politics are, red or blue or independent, who wouldn't want to save money by just chopping out all the waste in the federal government? And I think if there's one man that has the ability to do that, proven executional skills, it's Elon Musk. So I really endorse this idea.
Well, I think it could be a great team, obviously, with Donald Trump and the art of the deal. To speak on the international scale, with tariffs, obviously it's a word that Trump has bandied around a lot. What does that mean for, I suppose, the average Joe in America and for the future of international trade? We're looking at China, we're looking at EV production. What do Trump's tariffs mean?
So tariffs were used as a form of rhetoric, weaponry during the election cycle. Harris called them sales tax, like a VAT tax that we have in Europe. That's not what they are. In fact, there's a bill cruising around the Hill right now in the U.S. It's a tariff reciprocal act. And what it says is any of our trading partners that impose tariffs will put a reciprocal, identical tariff. So if Germany puts 10% on cars, we'll put 10% on their cars coming to the U.S., that kind of thing. And of course, there's a new act, the new NAFTA 2.0, if you want to call it that governs Canada, the United States, and Mexico, big trading partners. The one entity that I think you're going to see a lot more pressure on is China. China doesn't abide by the rules of the WTO. They joined in 1999 with all kinds of promises to play by the rules. They never did. So I'm an advocate for using tariffs to squeeze their heads like teenage pimples. And the way I point that out is to say, look, the only way a supreme leader stays in power perpetually is everybody has bread and butter. You have to have a job. Otherwise, you ride against the supreme leader. And that's just the way it is in a communist dictatorship. So the way you squeeze the supreme leader's head is you say, look, let's pick a sector. I'm just going to use an example. Yoga mats. Let's say the U.S. orders 1 million yoga mats a week from China. You put a 400% tariff on it. And all the people making yoga mats in China lose their jobs. And they don't have any bread and butter anymore. And the supreme leader goes, oh my goodness, I don't have any jobs for these yoga mat makers. And then you say, well, where else can we inflict some damage? Let's do it in this sector. Put on 400% tariff there, squeezing that teenage pimple till it pops. Then he gets on an airplane and flies to Washington saying, just kidding, I want to work out and be part of the reciprocal tariff act. Because China only understands the stick. They don't understand anything else.
It's a game of chicken.
Well, Trump scares his adversaries because he's unpredictable. He's just very unpredictable. When you know what your adversary is going to do all the time and they signal it to you beforehand, you're not scared of him anymore. They're scared shitless of Trump. And that's, excuse my French, but that's basically how it works. That's why you're seeing all these guys saying, oh, we want to have peace now. No, we want to stop. Because he's very unpredictable. So in the case of China, squeezing the supreme leader to the table is a good thing. So I would like to go to 400% tariffs. Because I do business in China. They don't play by the rules.
And how about on EVs? Because obviously, even a 20% or even a 30% tariff on EVs, I believe in the EU, they're trying to flood the market. Obviously, Germany's not happened. We've seen at Volkswagen cut 1,000 jobs in 2 months ago.
The point is, tariffs are temporary. They're a negotiating tactic. But if you're going to put them on, don't screw around. Go to 400%. Make it impossible for them to sell any widgets anywhere. So if you put 400% on an EV, no one's going to buy it. Only the Chinese can buy it. So all the people making the EVs, no bread, no butter. That's how you do it. Now, if I was the minister of Chinese head squeezing, that's how I would do it. And believe me, they will be at the table so fast because they cannot afford to have unemployment in that economy. And it's showing some cracks there. So you want to hit them while they're down and bring them to the table. They cheat on IP, they steal, you can't use their courts. A good example that people should focus on is Twitter, or not Twitter, but TikTok. TikTok has been deemed Chinese spyware by the American Congress. That's a bipartisan bill. By midnight on Jan 19th in the US, the servers are going to get turned off.
I've heard you say as well that you would like to buy it,
I would.
a consortium. Do you want to buy Twitter?
Yeah,
TikTok?
I would definitely buy TikTok. I would buy it because it's a great, it depends what I get with it. If I don't get the algorithm, all I'm getting is a mailing list, so I pay a lot less for that. But we'll see how this goes because, remember, they did this in India. After 4 years, they had 200 million users on it, and the supreme leader would not, play by the rules with the Indian government, and they said, we'll just turn it off. And everybody was squeamish for a week, and then they forgot about it. They just drifted onto other social media platforms. So, again, squeezing the supreme leader's head there is good. And it is spyware. I would never put that on a phone that I have sensitive data on. It's Chinese spyware. Everybody knows that. That's why it's shut down. They just shut it down in Canada. I mean, they're going to shut it down everywhere. But this is the arrogance of the supreme leader. He doesn't care. So you've got to squeeze his head. He will appreciate the head squeezing. He will thank you for it.
And is it the same, obviously, with the likes of Vladimir Putin and the war between Israel and Hamas? War is not good for business. Do you think Trump is going to have a large enough impact? He said famously, I will stop the wars within the first day of office. Do you think that's true?
Putin understands force. Not a very nice guy. He's killed a lot of people. But 25,000 young Russians a month lose their lives. He's buying their services now. There's no more patriots left. You get coffin money, your family gets a house, but you go die or get blown up. That's pretty brutal. So I would think giving him a call and saying, look, I've been thinking about this war. I don't like it. I don't want to pay for the Ukrainian costs, and I want it to stop. Come to the table, or I'll do something that will really surprise you, which is probably what people worry about with Trump, because we saw how he ended the Syrian conflict by just saying, I'm going to kill this guy. And he did. And I think that kind of erratic nature is what these adversaries worry about. Now, a lot of NATO players don't like to hear this, but I think war's horrible. I think all these people and children losing their lives is horrible. It's just, somebody has to stop this.
Exactly, and on a human level, but as well as
obviously
markets. So it affects the bread and butter as well. So you're taking food off of people's tables, affecting jobs, as well as the human suffering. It's bad all around.
It is. So I think people are willing to try a different way. Now, whether Trump's successful or not, we'll see. But this carnage of death of young children, I can't watch it anymore. No one can.
Of course.
It's got to stop.
Then, moving on to cryptocurrency, we've seen markets, as well as the price of Bitcoin increase. It broke $72,000, I believe, in the past few days. Do you believe under Trump, what is the height that you think it can get to under a Trump presidency?
So Trump has signaled, and the market knows this, that he is in favor of digital payment system, which includes Bitcoin, which is an asset class. I'm not saying that's a digital payment system, but it's no different than gold. I mean, you can own some gold, you can own some Bitcoin. I own both. What the problem is, we don't have institutional support for it yet because it's not regulated in the U.S. The way other commodities are. So the rumor on the street is that the CFTC, which regulates commodities, is going to get the mandate for crypto, and they're looking for someone to run it. And they'll probably take a lot of that away from Gensler at the SEC, who's been litigating this sector, and successfully, I might add. He's, you know, all the crypto cowboys, like Binance, CZ, he's a felon now. You know what happened to Sam Bankman-Fried. So people that took on Gensler all lost, and this is probably a good thing. So we move into a phase now where it's going to be regulated. There's a lot of optimism about it. Here in Abu Dhabi, we have the M2 exchange, which is a very interesting idea because it's completely compliant with its regulator. I see a lot of upside coming in crypto.
And a figure, just briefly, do you think, what's the limit? Do you think it can reach 200K under a Trump presidency?
I think we'll all see 100,000 shortly. I feel everybody should have 5% weighting in gold in their portfolio. Nothing wrong with 5% weighting in Bitcoin. I mean, why not? I mean, unless you really think, and you don't have to do this, I'm just saying alternative asset classes in times of uncertainty and inflation are good. I mean, I own gold and I've had it my whole life. I was given a locket from my Irish father when I was 11 years old that had a gold coin in it. That's when I fell in love with it. I've had that ever since. And I own bullion, I own ETFs. I mean, gold is gold. The Romans loved it, I love it. You know, Bitcoin is the new. It's not as old as gold, but it's performed very well for me.
Yeah. And just lastly, speaking on gold, obviously to have Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful in the studio, it would be a shame if I didn't ask about watches. You are, I would say, the most famous watch collector in the world now, doing millions of views on YouTube every month with the likes of Teddy Baldassar. He has just opened his new watch shop. I want to ask you, would you ever think of entering the watch strap business? The red bands are... They're synonymous with you.
It's a great question, but you know, what I've learned about watch collecting and getting access, I mean, the thing that in my journey into horology is, in order to get watchmakers that are really unique, who make only a few pieces a year, you need to be known as a collector. And what does that mean? It means that you support the art. It's no different than contemporary art, and you don't flip them. So flipping a watch, when you get a reputation for buying it at the entry price from the watchmaker and then turning around and selling it for 4 times that the next week, you're not a collector, you're just a flipper. And the watch community is very small. You know, in terms of the makers, there's probably 25 makers of consequence worldwide. The word gets out overnight that you're not a real collector. And so it takes a long time to earn the trust of an FP Journe or a Simon Britt or any of these makers. And I'm known I've never sold a watch. And so I have a very vast collection, and I'm a dial guy, as you know. So I'm always looking for the new dial. I'm wearing a Moser, a unique dial here. And of course, this is a classic Daytona. I thought, this is New York time, this is Abu Dhabi time. And so I support. The thing about getting into the business of retailing watches or retailing bands is all of a sudden...
I'd buy it, Kevin.
Yeah, no, I'm
100%.
You're no longer
I'd pay a penny for an O'Leary band.
But I'm very fortunate. Every watch company knows I won't wear it unless it has a red band. So they don't even offer me watches if they can't put a red band on. I would never buy them. So my whole thing's red band because it looks fantastic. Great with gold, great with platinum. I mean, this looks gorgeous. Works with my red.
Of course.
I just wonder if
like on Shark Tank.
Yeah, the whole thing is, you know, it's just over the years it's become one of my things. But each maker, watches are really a beautiful thing because they mark a period in your life. Every time I do a big deal, I buy a new watch, and I associate that deal with that watch. And you know, my daughters try and steal them, my wife, my son. Nobody gets to touch my watches. Like, that's it. That's the one thing that I've got. They're in vaults all around the world, you know, and I just love it. I just have so much fun. And the reason I like it is the community of watch collectors that I know all around the world are very eclectic. Surgeons, artists, financiers, royalty, you name it. And
journalists?
Yes, journalists. We share the passion of watches, and I think it enriches my life.
Great. Kevin O'Leary, a millionaire investor, host of the Smash Hit show at Shark Tank. Thank you so much for your time.
You got it. Thank you.
At Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Arabiya News,
It's very impressive.
where knowledge meets perspective.
Hello and welcome to Global News Today, bringing you exclusive insights and fresh perspectives from leading experts and influential decision makers every weekday here on Al Arabiya News. I'm Tom Burges Watson, and coming up in this special edition of the programme, we take a look back at some of the highlights of the last few weeks. Hello and welcome. The US President-elect Donald Trump has picked Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to lead the Department of Health and Human Services. Well, Kennedy has been accused of spewing controversial claims about vaccines at the height of the COVID-19 crisis and for opposing restrictions imposed during the pandemic. Well, he continues to bear the brunt of his claims, in particular his claim that vaccines are linked to autism. Well, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. ran for president in this year's election as an independent before dropping out in August. He then endorsed Trump in exchange for a role in the Republican administration. Well, as the new lead in Trump's health department, he says, quote, all of his policies are going to be science-based with the best science that's available.
I'm going to require, first of all, anybody who wants to take a vaccine, I'm not going to get in their way. If you want a vaccine, or if you want to vaccinate your children, those vaccines will be available. But I am going to tell the truth to Americans, and I'm going to do for the first time good science, right? When I was a kid, there were 3 vaccines. Today, there are 72, and we're going up to now, I think, 77 or 79 with the annual COVID vaccines. So, and not one of those vaccines, with the exception of the COVID vaccine, not one of those vaccines has been tested prior to licensure. So what I would do as president is I would require placebo-controlled trials, long-term safety trials that will look at efficacy, will look at safety, will look at the long-term impacts, and be able to inform Americans.
Well, let's get more now, and we can speak to Jan Halper-Hayes, who is a former member of President Trump's White House transition team. Jan, it's great to have you back with us here on Al Arabiya News. I'd like to talk to you about these latest nominees, in particular the nominee for Health Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Apparently he's going to make America healthy again. How's he going to do that?
Well, it's important to look at his position. He actually wrote a book that came out a couple of years ago that exposed our FDA and the CDC and the area that Fauci runs. And people need to understand that Fauci is a eugenist. And he has had a budget that has been so huge that he has had power over any epidemiologists, any researchers all over the world. And Robert Kennedy Jr. has seen through all of that. He has looked at the number of vaccines. Our babies get 76 vaccines. It's just not necessary for that to happen. But also, what happens is the pharmaceutical companies are the ones that fund our Federal Drug Administration. So he is going to clean up a lot of the corruption that goes on and focus on our foods that don't have GMO, that don't have the pesticides. It's very exciting. He understands it so incredibly well. There couldn't be anyone better to be that Health and Human Services Secretary.
Yeah, but difficult to understand why the scientific community is so up in arms about this. I mean, I've got a list of quotes with regards to this appointment that is extremely long. I couldn't possibly read them all out. The reaction from the Democrats is fairly predictable. They say he's dangerous, unqualified and unserious. But when it comes to the scientific community, for example, Professor John Joe McFadden at University of Surrey, who says this nomination demonstrates his disregard for science, he's talking about Donald Trump here, in favor of pseudoscience, misinformation and conspiracy theories. If confirmed, the policies he advocates will be a disaster, particularly for America. I mean, there's so many people to choose from in terms of finding criticism of this appointment. You're still sure he's the right man for the job. Why?
Well, it would be good if you got Dr. Mikovits or Dr. Peter McCullough, who can give you the other side of the science. The thing is that it is really the pharmaceutical community that funds all of this and drives the amount of drugs that we take. And yes, there have been scientific studies, and some of it Robert F. Kennedy considers very valid. But the fact is that it came out in Pfizer's documents that by December 2020, they knew that the vaccine would not prevent COVID. He has done research and he has exposed these people. Now, a lot of people have been bought. You really have to factor that in. Their livelihood comes from the corporate side of it. And so, yes, they don't like what he's saying because he's bringing out the truth behind a lot of, frankly, some fake peer review articles that have allowed for things to happen.
But, I mean, when it comes to his scientific background, I mean, is he really qualified to dish out opinions about vaccines at the height of a pandemic? I mean, was that a helpful thing for him to have done when, you know, there are plenty of scientists and plenty of large pharmaceutical organizations that ultimately put a stop to the pandemic, and we've moved on from the pandemic. I mean, they didn't do such a bad job, did they?
Well, actually, the COVID-1 was created and proven and patented in 2002 by Ralph Barrick out of the University of North Carolina, proving it could infect human lungs. And the SARS-CoV-19 was just an outgrowth of that, and Fauci had funded that. But let's back up a minute. A leader doesn't necessarily have to have the competence of their team. So he can know what the issues are. He can decide on the direction. He can see through the false scientific articles and the valid ones, and he can put the right people on to do the right thing.
But his education is primarily in law. What makes him qualified to call out scientists? Well,
Everyone needs to see or look up his book where he exposed Fauci and all of these health problems. You know, someone can be an incredible researcher over 20 years of being fascinated by it and have all this information and be able to communicate about it. So if anyone wants to discredit him, they're going to have a very difficult time because his knowledge base is so huge and thorough that people will have a hard time going up against him.
Indeed. Well, his scientific credentials are perhaps what's worrying many in the scientific community. But just moving on, I mean, the comments he's made, aren't you worried that, for example, his comments on vaccines could result in greater vaccine hesitancy amongst people in the United States? And that could have real health implications for adults as well as children, and in particular for children.
Well, I think what he wants to do is pare it down to the most relevant vaccines. Why do babies need 76 vaccines?
Good question, but that's something that scientists have decided, doctors have decided. It's a relevant question, but why does it have to be RFK Jr. who has the answer?
Sorry, it makes money for the pharmaceutical companies. Look, when my kid was in daycare and someone came down with the measles, the pediatrician said, get him there, because if he gets the measles, he will become immune to it. Even Fauci has said that when people got COVID and weren't vaccinated, they became immune. We've gotten so far away from natural remedies of people survived without all of these vaccines. And I don't think that making it a big worry and giving the side to the quote unquote scientific, you need to wait, because this is going to get exposed big time.
Okay, well, let's move on to some of the things he might do whilst he's in office. He says he's going to purge the Food and Drug Administration, better known by its acronym, the FDA. Why does that need to happen?
Well, let's see. When it came to the Pfizer documents, Dr. Robert Malone, who was the inventor of the mRNA and said no one should have that in a vaccine, but Pfizer and the FDA were going to seal all the documents for 75 years. Dr. Malone went to court, we got the documents, and we were able to find what they were trying to hide. The damage to pregnant women, the number of deaths, the improper control groups to test the validity of it. So the FDA is paid by the pharmaceutical companies. And often what happens is when they leave the FDA, they go work for the pharmaceutical companies.
But the FDA has got a reputation around the world as being perhaps the most prominent reference point for regulation and for standards. And isn't there a risk that if Kennedy damages its reputation, I mean, he's damaging the entire American scientific community, isn't he?
Well, I wouldn't go that far, because just because he shows what the problems are, what they've done wrong, they're also going to be doing a lot of things right. Just because there's criticism, it doesn't mean that there won't be good things done. And he won't be, and the fact is he'll be quite right about the actions that he's taking.
So what do you think he's planning to do then, concretely, to tackle it?
Well, I think he's going to investigate exactly why they have approved certain things. He's going to start there. He's going to find out who is making money on the side. And he is going to set it up a different kind of relationship, not where the pharmaceutical companies can pay the people of the FDA, but the FDA is focused on the safety of the people of the nation.
Okay, just looking at the sort of the general appointments across the board, just more generally speaking, you know, the ones that have been announced in the last few days, a flurry of appointments for this new administration. What are your thoughts? Do any of them, I mean, do you think it's fair to say, first of all, with RFK, that he's perhaps the most controversial of all of them so far?
I think if you talk to them, they don't like the idea that Matt Gaetz is going to be the Attorney General. Marco Rubio as Secretary of State. I think putting Tulsi Gabbard in for our spy agencies was one of the best things that Trump did. The fact that Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk, both very, very successful business people, are going to find a way that our government excels. It were two great appointments. He has asked the lunaticfarmer.com to be an advisor to the Agriculture Secretary so that we can bring about a better way of raising our food. He's he's shaking things up, things that have needed to be changed for years and years and years.
Sure. I mean, disruption seems to be a common theme with quite a lot of the people who've been announced in the last few days. But they've got to be qualified, haven't they, to do the job? And there have even been people from the Republican Party who've spoken to us on this channel and expressed serious concern about one or two of them. And you mentioned Matt Gaetz. Are you concerned about him?
Well, you have to understand how the Department of Justice has withheld or redacted documents that Congress has every right to oversee. Congress is basically each agency's boss because they set the laws and they approve things. I think Matt Gaetz, being the Attorney General, is going to dig in to the lawfare. He's going to dig into the relationship with the FBI and the CIA. And he will shake things up. He is a disruptor par excellence, and actually that's what's needed, especially after the lawfare that came out against Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean, what happens next? Because when you've got people like Matt Gaetz and RFK Jr. That not everyone approves of by any stretch of the imagination, supposing they don't get confirmation from the Senate, there's something called a recess appointment, where I gather they can be sort of fast-tracked in or pushed into those positions. Just tell us a bit about how you see things unfolding.
Well, I think it's actually, we now have 53 senators. So in all probability, his picks will get confirmed. But using the recess appointments takes all of that out of it and allows people to get and do their job. I'm all for that, so that there are none of these games that go on. Look, there was someone who he wanted to be number 3 at the Department of Defense. And it turned out that 20 years before, the ex-wife had done something. And so the Democrats brought that up and rubbed it in his face. We don't need that kind of petty stuff going on.
Well, it happens on both sides of the aisle, doesn't it, when new administrations come in? And the whole point of having these great institutions is that they vet the candidates and make sure they can stand up to scrutiny. Surely that's the whole point.
Well, it is the whole point, but when we have both sides, and the Republicans aren't necessarily as petty as the Democrats, they scrutinize, but they tend to scrutinize with more facts and concerns, like when they asked the latest appointment to the Supreme Court, what is a woman? And she couldn't answer it. Well, that was very revealing to the country.
So when John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, says all options are on the table to clear Trump's nominees, just how do you interpret that? What do you think he means by that?
Well, I don't know, because Thune doesn't really like Trump. So we might see some jockeying going on.
Okay, but just for the record, you're happy with the announcement that RFK is going to be looking after health matters for you and millions of other Americans?
Absolutely. And the thing is that people are so quick to judge instead of waiting to see the actions he's going to take. And that is what Trump has put in there. People who will take action and deal with the problems that we've been aware of for decades and find ways to solve them. And that's what people need to be focusing on.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much for your time today, Jan Halper-Hayes. Thank you very much indeed to you.
Thank you.
Well, staying with the news of the appointment of RFK Jr., we can speak now to the Executive Director of the American Public Health Association, George C. Benjamin. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. I'd just like to get your thoughts, first of all. How do you feel about having an anti-vaxxer having such a public and prominent role when it comes to health matters?
You know, we actually think this is the wrong guy for the job. He doesn't have the medical training, the management skills to manage such a large enterprise, the temperament, and his many of his public statements have resulted in the fact that he doesn't have people's trust to run this kind of agency.
Okay, so obviously you don't feel a huge amount of confidence. And of course, you've worked already with the Trump administration during the last term. Just tell us a bit about how that relationship works. Do they often come to you and ask for advice?
Well, I've been personally in D.C. for a long time, and I've been a local health officer in this region. And so, yeah, I've worked with administrations of both Democrats and Republicans. And I've been on advisory committees, and as my association, which is, the largest public health association in America, we've been around since 1872. We do advise the federal government in a variety of ways, either directly or indirectly. And we've worked with the Trump administration in the past. They've had some extraordinarily competent people to work with. We did have to work with them during COVID because, COVID was a big event, like it was everywhere else. And we had things that went real well, but we also had some things that did not go well when people who were not qualified got into the fray.
And do you imagine that you, in your capacity as Executive Director of American Public Health, you will have to work closely with RFK Jr.?
I'm going to have to work closely with the department. Obviously, the secretary has to decide who he wants to listen to, but I'm certainly going to reach out to him should he be confirmed, just because I've worked with every other secretary and I've known every other secretary, in the department since at least 1990.
A lot of shock from the scientific community about RFK being given this role, given in particular his anti-vax stance. But when it comes to business and how he runs the department under his control, I mean, he seems to suggest there's a lot of wastage, there's a lot of corruption, and there's a need for much greater transparency. Do you think he's got a point?
Every organization can improve in its efficiency. And, most of his statements are absolutely overstated. The organization has got highly competent people, and can things be improved? Absolutely. But the Food and Drug Administration, the CDC, as entities that he's specifically targeted, are terribly underfunded. If the truth be shown, and we know that they're terribly underfunded.
And he's issued this message on X, telling people in the FDA, saying they're part of a corrupt system. I've got two messages for you: preserve your records and pack your bags. I mean, do you feel threatened by that?
If I was an employee, absolutely, I would feel threatened. Many of these people can make a lot more money in the private sector without the kind of threats. They enjoy what they do. They've committed to public service, and that's not the way you treat public servants.
What do you make of some of Kennedy's theories? He's got a theory, I gather, about removing fluoride from drinking water, for example. What's the science behind that, do you think?
We know that fluoride is safe and effective in the doses that are delivered. Primarily, people used to get their fluoride in their drinking water. They now can get fluoride in a variety of other ways, including toothpaste, specialized treatments when you go to the dentist's office. But I got to tell you, there are a lot of people that don't go to the dentist's office. There are a lot of people that don't drink water out of the tap. There are a lot of people that still drink water that comes out of wells. So fluoride in the drinking water and professional water systems is very important. Can you be given too much of anything? Absolutely. Anything that's therapeutic, you can get too much of. So to the extent that use of fluoride over time might change, there's no reason not to have a national conversation about it. But his theories and the way he's articulated them are not helpful to the conversation.
But clearly America does face a number of health issues, major concerns, the opioid crisis, There's obviously an issue with regards to nutrition and obesity in the United States. Don't you think it's a good thing that someone with a totally fresh perspective and a totally different set of ideas should come in and perhaps look at some of these historic problems in a different way?
Every administration has new people with new ideas and new ideas. He's not unique there. Yes, there's an obesity problem, an obesity epidemic, an opioid epidemic, a gun violence epidemic, an epidemic of maternal child health. Maternal mortality is high in the United States, growing STDs. Healthcare costs are going through the roof. So he's got a lot of things he's going to walk into that are going to occupy his time on day one, none of which he has any skill, expertise, or training to manage.
Okay, so you clearly don't think he's the right man for the job. But, I mean, when it comes to the FDA and looking at nutrition and what people eat in America, I mean, he does seem to have some reasonable points, doesn't he? I mean, when you look at the correlation between various health issues in the United States and the sorts of things people are eating, I mean, he's as qualified as anyone to see that there's a problem and to try and fix it, isn't he?
Well, I'd be happy to have him try to fix it. The FDA has been trying to fix the same problem he's articulating for many, many years. So if he can aid in that, great. But, you know, this is not something that he can come in by fiat and change overnight. And in fact, the very people that he's demonizing are the very people that he's going to need to help him make any changes that he's proposing. And by the way, you know, the biggest problem in America, even though I would agree, high fat, high salt, low nutritious foods are a problem. Obesity certainly is a problem. You're looking at a guy who struggled to keep my weight down my whole adult life. But having said that, the biggest problem we have in America is food insecurity. That's a problem the health department needs to take on with vengeance. He can also make sure that people have in our schools nutritious lunches. And yeah, we need a champion for nutritious lunches in the schools. So if he articulates everybody having access to affordable, safe food, nutritious lunches, and kids are able to get those lunches in school that they need, that they can't get at home, we're all for it and we'll work with him on that. If he goes in and says, you people are bad and we're going to, by fiat, try to change the rules, he's going to be a failure. It's not that we're going to necessarily be the group that's opposing to him, but he won't have if he doesn't have the industry to help him do this, he won't be successful.
Yeah, I mean, I've been looking at reaction to the news of RFK Jr.'s nomination, lots of it, and it comes from all corners of the globe. I just found this from Professor Simon Wesley at King's College London. He's a professor of psychiatry, and he says, quote, that sound you just heard was my jaw dropping, hitting the floor and rolling out of the door. As someone who graduated from a Texas high school, I have a great admiration and affection for Americans. They deserve better, much better than this. Who do you think would have been a better choice than RFK Jr. as Donald Trump's pick to head up this important role?
Yeah, I'd be the one to condemn anybody that would name. But let me just say that the Republican Party has a deep, long, highly qualified bench. Just look at many of the people that were in the last administration. Several of them would be excellent secretaries. Look at people that have been in previous Republican administrations. Many of them can be excellent secretaries. This is just not the guy for the job. Had they put in someone who was properly trained, with the management skills and experience, with the temperament, and could develop the trust of the American people, we would all be for him. And by the way, we supported many of the Trump administration appointees the last time in the health department.
Yeah, I mean, some people have gone much further than the person that I just quoted there, the professor I quoted there. Others in the political realm have called RFK Jr.'s appointment dangerous, unqualified, unserious, they've said. And I'm just wondering, lastly, whether you think perhaps his appointment threatens to undermine America's position as a reference point and a center of excellence for the global scientific community.
The secretary is our ombudsman to the world, and I don't know how you take him seriously because we don't.
Okay, well, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. George C. Benjamin, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Syria is still the world's largest refugee crisis, but now the future for Syrians could be about to change, as many people in neighbouring countries like Turkey, as well as in the UK and Germany, are talking about finally returning home. Well, from the Turkish-Syrian border, Hamad Mahmoud, a Syrian originally from Deir ez-Zor, who's been living in Turkey for the past 9 years, says he's thrilled to be finally returning home. He says he feels like a bird ready to fly.
I'm going to my country. I'm going to Syria, my country. Actually, I feel now, I didn't feel like this moment. I didn't before this time. I feel like bird, like I want to fly to sky because I'm so happy. Our country is free now.
Well, for Syrians still in Syria, the news of Assad's fall brought a wave of jubilation. Many celebrated and rejoiced. Let's take a listen to what some of them had to say.
I am out and about, and there's nothing to be afraid of. The situation in the country is good. We just hope to get the economy moving again.
This criminal, corrupt regime, Assad and his father, has brought us nothing but anger, injustice, torture, and a lack of livelihood. My father was in the Syrian army. He used to warn us that the walls have ears when we were younger. So when we asked about what was happening in Hama, or what this criminal regime was up to, he would remind us that we were being listened to, and that could lead to his execution.
At this very moment, we are well and safe. The burden, depression, and internal sadness have been lifted from our chests. We've been depressed ever since 1963 until now.
Well, since 2011, more than 14 million Syrians have been forced to flee their homes looking for safety. Well, more than 7.2 million Syrians are living displaced within their own country. Around 5.5 million others are living in Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq and Egypt. Well, let's get more now, and we can speak to Walid Safour, who served as the first representative of the Syrian National Coalition to the UK and who is the founder and the president of the Syrian Human Rights Committee. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. We just listened to some people there expressing their hopes for the future of Syria. Some people summing this up as being a hopeful but uncertain future for your country. Does that sound about right?
Of course, we are so happy and so pleased for the fall of the dictator regime. But we have a genuine apprehension about the future. And we hope that no international involvement to abolish our pleasure and our happiness. We are so happy that this regime, which deprived us from our homeland for around 45 years, to come from the window after we have been driven from the door by the Syrian youth who left Syria while they were 10 years old and returned. They are now 24 and 25 years old, and they fought with the restraint, and they were observing the instructions given to them to be good and to be very disciplined with all the people, even the enemies, even the people who tortured them. But what happened next is the crucial one for us. Now the Syrian regime, Bashar al-Assad, has fled to Russia. And Russia, I wonder, they accepted him as a refugee for humanitarian reasons. What sort of reasons for a criminal of war? Yesterday, people come out from the prisons, from Sinai prisons, from other prisons, and disastrous stories were told. Children at the age of 1 and 2 years were born in the prisons and the detention centers. People who lost their senses, their eyes, and still tens of thousands of people who were still lost in the Syrian prisons, and their families are looking for them everywhere. So what the reasons for Russia to keep this prisoner of war and this criminal to accept him as a refugee for humanitarian reason? There is no reason but to be brought to justice in Syria or before the international community if they are not safe about him in Syria.
Okay, Walid, I just want to ask you about those discoveries at the Sednaya prison. Does that go beyond your worst nightmares in terms of what you thought that the Assad regime was capable of?
I think now we are beyond the Assad regime, and we hope for a civilian rule, for civilian government, for a rule of justice, for a rule of equality, and there's no discrimination according to sect or to religion or to whatever. We are looking for democracy and all the people were alike in front of the rule of law. No one is above the other. This is what all the Syrian people are looking for at this moment, except the criminals, except those who regarded Syria as a field and farm for their own interest. This is what we are looking for now. And I think we started a new era now, and we started a new struggle for democracy and for equality and for justice, for the role of law in Syria.
Are you hopeful for this period of transition, and when do you think realistically elections could be held?
I am very hopeful that a transition period will come forward, except if there are the anti-change will be involved with the aid of international parties. And I hope that the international community will regard and took into consideration the past 60 years of Ba'ath rule and 54 years of Assad rules, the rules in black blood on their hands, and not to be involved in a dirty tricks against the Syrian people.
We've heard from Tehran. Iran says that the revolution against Bashar al-Assad was an American-Israeli plot to, quote, destabilize the Middle East and redraw its political map. They're saying that this anti-Assad sentiment wasn't in fact homegrown. It came from overseas. How do you respond to that?
What they have done from 2012, Tehran and its agencies brought from Lebanon, from Asia, from Afghanistan, from Pakistan, all its militias, they contributed to the mischief of the Syrian people. They killed Syrian people. They butchered us. I'm from the city of Homs. What have they done in the city of Qusayr, in the province of Homs? They displaced all people of Al-Qusayr city, and it was occupied by what is called Hezbollah. It is the party of the Satan. This is what happened. And they come to the neighborhood one by one, and they butchered us. They killed my close relatives. They killed the husband of my nephew, my nieces. 2 of them were killed, butchered, with the kitchen knife. This is what Tehran has done. It is not the other parties. The first party to be claimed for our mischief is Tehran and then Russia. They aided this criminal regime to survive for this 13 years of the Syrian upheaval and against this dictatorship of al-Assad's regime.
Are you feeling that the country is heading now in the sort of direction that you would want to actually return to Syria? Is that something you're thinking about doing yourself, along with the many millions of Syrians who live overseas?
I hope, and all the sincere Syrians who wanted the interest of their country, they hope that the country is heading towards a healthy future, towards democracy, towards equality, towards justice, towards to leave this black past of the dictatorship to reconciliation with all its components. This is what we are hope, and I've been in contact with many Syrians in the diaspora and inside Syria and in the countries around Syria where many Syrians are living. We've been in contact with them in the last few days, and all of them are hoping for a better Syria, for Syria where reconciliation was brought about among the Syrian people, all of them. We are not against anyone, only we are against those who committed crimes, who killed, who tortured, who took the decisions against the Syrian people. We are against only about these, and these are very few. Other than that, nobody is against any other body.
Okay, and just lastly, I mean, looking at the composition of Syria's new leadership, lots of different groups, lots of different ideologies and ideas for the future of Syria, and indeed some from the old guard, because the former Prime Minister Mohammed Jalali is part of the transition. Aren't you worried that such a disparate group of people could end up infighting and there'll be more chaos to come?
I think our people has learned a lot of lessons from the past, when they were apart and when they fought each other. Now all of them are looking for a better Syria, for a future where all Syrians are alike. And I think as long as all the people are heading like that, and they are trying to overcome all difficulties. I know there are a lot of difficulties in our march towards arriving the last goal and the last end. But I think we are looking for the wise people to overcome all of these with all people in order to reach it. And I hope they will not lose the last chance and come back to give a chance to change people in order to abolish this. I don't want to say it's a revolution. It's a change towards equality, towards democracy, towards human rights, towards justice, towards equality in Syria.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. We really appreciate it. Walid Safour, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, staying with U.S. reaction to these developments in Syria, the U.S. President-elect Donald Trump said earlier on that the Russian President Vladimir Putin had, quote, lost all interest in Syria because of Ukraine. Well, he also praised Israel's fighting success, he said, adding that Russia and Iran are now in a weakened state. Well, for more analysis, we can speak now to Simone Ledeen, who is a former US Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Middle East Policy. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. This is being described as one of the biggest turning points for the Middle East in generations. Of course, I'm talking about the fall of Bashar al-Assad. Do you agree with that?
I do, yes. This is a tectonic plate level shift in the Middle East, and I think anyone who wants to draw any conclusions at this point is quite premature. I think we're all watching it play out in front of us without a clear idea of exactly where this shift will stop.
Do you think it's likely that Washington is engaging with Syria's new leaders?
I believe, according to the media reports that I've seen and what I'm hearing from folks in my network, they are working to engage with them. I hope at the same time they're also engaging, and I believe they are with Turkey, as Turkey plays a large role in influencing these groups as well.
Yeah, I mean, the group in particular that we've been talking most about is, of course, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or as it's known as HTS. I mean, there are concerns about them, not least because they are former affiliates of al-Qaeda. But do you think they really have changed their spots?
Well, I think that's an interesting question, and I don't believe that we can draw any conclusions based on promises. I think the international community needs to be monitoring their activities to see and assert for ourselves if HTS has indeed changed its spots. I think time will tell. I certainly wouldn't want to be premature, though, in making these assumptions or stating categorically one way or another that a group with such a long history and such a close affiliation with al-Qaeda indeed has sort of left that organization. I think another important point is the congratulatory messages to HTS from extremist groups across the world. I think that's also very telling and should be included in any clear-headed evaluation of what HTS is today and what their plans for the future might be.
Yeah, and how do you rate the chances of all these different factions in Syria of working together? Do you think they're going to be able to, or do you think it's just a matter of time before they start fighting each other?
I think a more realistic approach to this might be a broad realization that the country of Syria, as we've known it to this point, doesn't really exist anymore, and that it might be more beneficial to consider different regional areas that are governed by different groups. I think that might be more practical and might lead to a more sort of sustained peace rather than these very disparate groups with, frankly, different goals for them to try to work together. I'm not sure that's a realistic approach, frankly.
Okay, so you think there's a likelihood of Syria, as we know it, being divided. We know that Donald Trump has sent his future Middle East advisor, Massad Boulos, to the region. He arrived during the course of the weekend. He's discussing the situation. I mean, how do you see the Trump administration shaping developments in this region?
Well, first and foremost, I would point out President-elect Trump's very public social media post saying we must stay out of this. There's no U.S. interest in this right now. I believe what he meant was, and this was still at a time when the Assad regime had not formally fallen, although I think it was clear it was going to. I think in that context, Trump was stating clearly, we have no interest in this. There's no American interest here. I think now, as we're looking at the future of the region and specifically Syria and all of the different international players who are involved in Syria, there certainly is a U.S. interest there. And so it is gratifying to see that one of his top advisors is already making moves in the region, I think it really only will benefit us in the long run. And it's so clear now, with a little over a month to go before President Trump takes office, that he's already starting to make his moves and to assert what his new administration will be promoting. And I personally very much look forward to that.
Okay, I mean, obviously, one of the things that President Trump has said is that this has been damaging for Iran and Russia. I mean, they are, of course, two countries that have exerted considerable influence over Syria. I mean, just how damaging do you think the fall of Bashar al-Assad has been for those two countries?
I think it's been, particularly for Iran, it's been absolutely devastating. I think for Russia, it remains to be seen. I saw reports leading up to this program that Russia intends to maintain its forces in Syria. So we'll see, Tartus in particular, we'll see how that plays out. And if they're able to do that, and if HTS and its allies will fight that or not. But I do think, with respect to Iran, it showed how devastated, in particular, Hezbollah has been by the Israeli defensive attacks against Hezbollah, and they've completely decapitated not only the leadership, but also the significant weapon stockpiles that Hezbollah has been building for decades now. So they were completely incapable of acting, incapable of defending Assad, who allowed them to continue to move weapons between Iran and the border with Israel for all of these years. So Iran is effectively defanged. If they were going to make a move, they would have. They just can't. So I think this has been devastating for Iran. And certainly Erdogan in Turkey saw the opportunity, saw how defanged the Iranian regime is, and therefore, with the groups that he's been supporting, made his move, and that's what we're seeing play out now.
You mentioned those weapons stockpiles across Syria. There are also some pretty dangerous weapons. I mean, obviously, all weapons are dangerous, but I'm talking in particular about the possibility of there being chemical weapons amongst them. Do you think that's likely?
Unfortunately, yes, I do think that's likely, and in violation as well of an earlier agreement that was made with Russia, who had promised to make sure that Syria got rid of the stockpiles that it had of chemical weapons and did not begin producing new chemical weapons. So that's an important question that I think that we should all be looking at and questioning as the international community. But yes, it is incredibly concerning that these weapons might still exist and be in Syria, and worst case scenario, fall into the hands of people who would want to use them, especially against innocent civilians. So I hope there's a serious effort underway. I know President Biden made a comment about it, but chemical weapons, I think, for those of us who have any experience in that world, incredibly concerning because they're so easy to hide, to move. Obviously, there are protocols that are needed to protect the carrier from actually, getting caught up and misusing them or mishandling them. But at the same time, we need to make sure that they're destroyed or that they're protected. The stockpiles are destroyed in a safe manner. And so, yes, I'm very concerned about that. And I think the international community would be as well.
Bashar al-Assad has been granted asylum in Moscow, we understand. He's presumably not going to have much to do now that he doesn't have a country to run. He had a sophisticated PR machine working on his behalf in Damascus. In particular, they succeeded in confusing journalists and confusing the world about the realities on the ground in Syria. What needs to be done to ensure that Bashar al-Assad and that PR machine don't carry on from a distance, trying to confuse and divide the country of Syria as it undergoes this new transition?
I think that's a very interesting question. The best thing that I believe that we all can do is to highlight and call out the propaganda and the lies where we see them. As you pointed out, a lot of the propaganda that has been disseminated has been proven to be false, and that is a great place to start. I think the credibility of the organizations that propagated this has been drastically undermined. And so I think it's important as we move forward to point out how indeed this has been propaganda and how perhaps some of us were fooled in the past, but now we see the reality on the ground of what has happened and what is happening in the future. And I think with Bashar al-Assad now in Moscow and out of Syria and without access to a lot of the institutions that he was using to do this, I think it will be much more clear moving forward.
Okay, and just lastly, Simone, I mean, we've all been looking at these developments in Syria with disbelief. I've been covering the story for 13 years. You've probably been covering it for a similar amount of time, obviously with a different hat on. But what's really stood out for you out of all the images that we've seen coming out of Syria these last 48 hours or so? What's really struck you the most?
I think above all, the images out of Sidnaya prison, where there appear to still be people who are trapped inside the prison, and they're trying to figure out how to get them out. They're actually images that recall to me images from World War II and the liberation of the concentration camps and the faces of the people who were liberated. It's incredibly just emotional, really hard to put into words the suffering of those people. And the fact that they're getting freed now. I think there's a lot of reason to feel apprehension about the future, very real reasons too. But I think also important to take a moment to celebrate the release of these people, many of whom were political prisoners who their crimes were minor compared to what they've suffered since. And so to me, these are really the most powerful images so far. And I hope I hope for Syria, for the Syrian people, a new day and an opportunity for self-determination and in a positive direction and a peaceful direction. And I think the international community hopes that for them as well.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Simone Ledeen, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Now we're going to turn our attention to the journalists who have documented the turmoil in Syria over the years. Well, our special guest today is the renowned war photographer Paul Conroy, who gave us a front row view of the Syria civil war in 2012 through his camera lens. Well, Paul is with us today to reflect on the fall of Bashar al-Assad more than 13 years after the Syrian government severely injured him and killed his colleague, the veteran Sunday Times reporter Mary Colvin, and the French photographer Remy Ochlik. This in Baba Amr on the edge of the Syrian city of Homs. Paul, thank you very much indeed for being with us. Many of us have been taken by surprise at events in Syria, especially the speed at which they unfolded the last few days. What's been your reaction to what's happened there during the last 10 days or so?
Equally as surprised, I think. Everyone who's been involved in Syria, a reporter from there, was watching with interest because of Russia's situation and Hezbollah's situation, the Iranian issues with Israel. But I don't think any of us really saw this coming and happening so fast. I'm in Odessa at the moment, and I'm kind of going through 4-hourly power cuts. And over the last few days, it seemed like every time I got back online to get more information, another city had fallen. So I'm as astonished, but I'm as pleased as anyone can be, for the Syrians, after 54 years Assad family rule to have that, throw that yoke off. I can't really put it into words how happy I am for them.
And as you watched these developments unfold and you saw the opposition forces making progress in Aleppo, then in Hama, then in Homs, did you find yourself having to manage your own expectations in case this was another false start?
Absolutely. You know, we've seen over the years, you know, rebel events. I think it was 2016, 17. It looked like the regime may fall, and then the Russians stepped in particularly with their air force, and managed to push back the tide. So yeah, it's certainly in the early days. You know, Aleppo going was a huge shock. You know, it was like, wow, that is a major gain. And I kind of thought that maybe they'd consolidate their positions in Aleppo, and then it would be a grinding push down the road, you know, quite savage. But then, you know, we saw them kind of almost get Aleppo and then immediately move on to Hama. And as they advanced, your expectations and hopes grew. But there was also a part saying, be careful, you know, we didn't know if the regime were going to make a big stand at Hama. But then Hama went, and then Homs, you know, which is of particular interest to me. Homs became the focus. And that's when that's when the nerves really kicked in because of mine and Maria's connection to Homs and what happened there. And then, you know, Homs, and then almost immediately Damascus. You know, it was I won't say comical, but I was just, what? You know, because I'd come out of a blackout and check my phone again and go, oh, Hama's gone, on the road to Homs. Stunning.
Extraordinary events, as you say. Let's cast our eye back to the 22nd of February 2012 and stay in Homs. Just tell us what happened on that day.
Well, the previous day to the 22nd, the situation had gotten so bad. A lot of the people who'd taken us in had been killed. A lot of the FSA guys who got us into Homs have been killed. And the media centre workers, the journalists and the activists who were reporting from this one media centre we were based in, you know, every time they went out, someone seemed to get killed. So it reached its peak of shelling, just 24-hour-a-day shelling. And that day, me and Maria had the conversation, and I said, I really don't see how we're going to be able to file another piece. You know, I think we've overcooked things. So let's do some TV interviews. Let's, you know, show the world what's happening now. We had access to a satellite link. So we did interviews with the BBC, Channel 4, and then finally with Anderson Cooper on CNN. And that was about midnight. And Marie told the story of a tiny baby who died from shrapnel wounds to the stomach. We kind of went to lay down in the back room, small back room, the media centre, with the intention of getting up and going back to the field hospital the next day. But about 6 a.m., two huge explosions rocked the building, which woke everyone up. Everyone was asleep on the floor. There were about 20 people in there. And then, say, 30 seconds later, another 2 shells landed. And at this point, I was ex-artillery, British artillery, so I understood fire patterns and what was happening. And they were walking shells into the media centre, towards the media centre. 30 seconds later, what I expected to happen happened. Something hit the back of the building, and then something hit the top of the building, and there was just chaos at that point. And then I think it was the third shell. Marie and Remy Oshlik, a French photographer, were making for the door. And they got just by the door, and the shell landed just outside and killed them instantly. I didn't fall over, but something had hit me, and I kind of checked myself and put my hand on my leg, and my hand just went straight through my leg and came out the other side. And I knew my tourniquet had been blown up as well, all the medical kit. So I just wrapped a scarf around and made a makeshift tourniquet. And then they kept shelling for about another 15 minutes then. And eventually they grabbed me from in the rubble, pulled me back inside the building because the front of the building had gone at this point. And then they took me, and threw me in the back of a truck and took me to the field hospital where Dr. Mohammed, an amazing doctor who'd stayed in homes to treat people, he kind of patched me up and got me stabilized.
I mean, it's an incredibly traumatic experience that you went through, an extremely tragic one as well, because you lost, as you said, colleagues of yours that you work with, notably Marie Colvin. And it sounds from what you're saying as well, like you feel like you were specifically targeted by the regime of Bashar al-Assad. Why do you think he wanted to do that?
I think it was a simple case of kill the messenger. The message we got out in our pieces for the Sunday Times and also on them interviews was a tale of slaughter. They were just slaughtering. The only people in that neighborhood, really, there were a few Free Syrian Army, but it was mostly civilians. What we were seeing was civilians being ripped to pieces by Assad's artillery, and we were getting that message out from the spot, which I think offended them. And I could tell, just by the fire pattern, most of the artillery attacks in Bab al-Amr at that point, they would just rather lazily shell the neighborhood. But when that attack started, there was very precise artillery work. It was professional. They did the 2 location shots. We suspect they had a drone overhead adjusting the fire. And just by the nature of the attack, I always said it was targeted. And then subsequently, Marie's sister Kat worked for many years, we all did, on gathering evidence. And we eventually found a paper trail back to the regime, back to the people who planned the attack, what they got in return, cars, money. And Kat won a case in the American courts where the judge said specifically Marie was assassinated for her journalism.
Bashar al-Assad, therefore, the person at the pinnacle of the organisation, the regime that tried to kill you and succeeded in killing many others, notably, as we've been saying, Marie Colvin. He's now in Russia. He's been given asylum there. What would you like to see happen to him?
I think, one of the biggest things that myself and every Syrian could possibly want is some form of accountability. We hoped, but we knew it was a bit of a faint hope that he would, he's not the kind of character who would do a last stand in Damascus. The odds were always on that he'd escape. But of course, with hopefully with more evidence gathered once they get into the government buildings, and certainly the Muhakhbarat and the secret services, there's a lot of evidence out there. In an ideal world, international arrest warrants, and then in a perfect world, see him in a dock. I think that would be the biggest gift to the Syrian people, for justice to be seen to be done.
Let's talk a little bit more about Marie Colvin. You had a really close working relationship with her. She had a really formidable reputation, didn't she? 'Cause she lost an eye during a grenade attack in Sri Lanka in 2001, hence the eye patch that was sort of so iconic, a signature sort of feature when you think about her. Just tell us, what was she like?
She was quite amazing. I mean, I met her in Syria, ironically, in 2003, and she was just this. I just tried to break into Iraq by making my own boat, and she found out about this. I got captured and arrested and eventually released, but she found out about this, and I was just, first time I met her, I was sat in a bar at the hotel in Syria, and she just came in. She just stood there silhouetted by the door, really cinematic entrance. And she was just stood there and went, "Who and where is the boatman?" And I kind of, into me, and she just went up. She went, "Marie Colvin, Sunday Times, can I buy you a whiskey?" And I was like, "Yes, you can." But she was a force of nature, and I loved what we did. Marie and her journalism was very much people focused, and focused on the people who more often than not have the least say in any war situation, which is women and children. So that was always our focus when we worked together. She really, you know, there are experts who talk about the military situation and the weapons being used, and that is a form of journalism. Marie was very much get me to the families, get me to the people, and that's, you know, that's why we were in Baba Amra. That's why we were in that part of Homs, because there were 25,000 women and kids there, and that's what she wanted, and pretty much nothing would stop her. You know, we crawled through a three mile long sewer tunnel to get into Homs. That was how dedicated she was to the story. Force of nature.
Yeah, I mean, a force of nature is how you describe her. Other people who worked with her said, you know, she was not necessarily always the easiest person to work with, and that was also probably by her own admission as well. But it sounds like you really managed to hit it off.
She used to give people the slip quite often. If it wasn't working, the foreign desk would get a call saying, "I've lost her, she's gone," and she'd send them one way and she'd go the other way. So yeah, it was a relief that we got on so well, you know, because we spent a lot of time in situations like that, and we had the same dark humour, which helped.
What do you think she'd make of what's happened in Syria these last few days?
I think I wouldn't be sitting in Odessa if Marie was with us now. I would be long ago on the way there. I think it would be bittersweet. Of course, she would be elated to see the Syrian people taste freedom. I think the bitter part of it would be seeing Assad slope off to Russia. You know, that would grate on her nerves.
You say that Bashar al-Assad tried to silence the media, tried to silence you. He failed to silence you. But one of the techniques he used was he had this team of propagandists who peddled a very different narrative about what was happening in Syria. Some of them were foreign. One was British, notably, another Canadian. They're still at it, actually. I've been looking at their Twitter feeds. But how effective do you think they were in distorting people's understanding of the civil war in Syria?
I think they were actually quite effective. And then, you know, can I name them? Because I know exactly who you're talking about. You know, Vanessa Beeley and Eve Bartlett and a couple of others really did pump out this pro-regime message. And as I always said, their objective was not to convince anyone of anything in particular. It was just to muddy the waters so much that people didn't know what was true. You know, and that's that. You know, we have a burden of proof as journalists. We have to, you know, stand by it, verify it, and you know, put your name to that. With these people who really did go full regime, their only job was to muddy the waters. And I used to get people back home who knew my history with Syria, who would say to me things like, "Are the white helmets jihadists?" And I would be annoyed, but I would be like, why do you even think that? You know, I've told you 1,000 times, you know, no. But these people did muddy the waters so much without any burden of proof. It would just keep pumping this river of bilge onto the internet, into the newspapers, and it was successful. I think, you know, it's been tried again here in Russia, and I don't think it's been as successful. I think people have seen through that now, but you know, the fact that they're still at it, I was looking at some of the things that she's been writing lately, and just astonishing how far they will go in the name of a bad cause.
Indeed. We've got to let you go fairly soon. Just lastly, I want to ask you, you know, obviously events of 2012 are going to be with you for the rest of your life. Seems like you're going to carry on having really strong links with Syria moving forwards. Are you optimistic about the country's future?
I am actually, and I'll tell you, I know there's a lot of people going, "Oh, what happens now?" Yeah, what everyone has to remember is the Syrian people have had 54 years of brutal dictatorial rule. when they had the uprising in 2011-12, they were not standing there in Homs in all of the major cities calling for any form of draconian Sharia law. They were out there protesting. They wanted, a liberation of the constitution, more rights to vote. They weren't after that. And I think if anyone comes in now, and I think, the HTS have seen, they tried in Idlib with the hard line. It didn't work. The Syrian people didn't want it. And I think anyone who now tries to force upon the Syrian people another form of draconian hardline law will be given short shrift. I just don't think they will manage it. I think they need all the help they can get to make a democracy happen. But, it does involve letting the Syrians now decide their future. And, it's been plagued by foreign powers, with, certainly Hezbollah, Iran and Russia have been very bad for Syria. I think now the Syrians will decide, and they won't have it forced upon them. They know how to resist this now. It won't happen again.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for your time. Photojournalist Paul Conroy, thank you for your time.
Yes.
Now, turning our attention to the United States, where local and federal authorities are attempting to reassure the public as multiple drone sightings on the East Coast have been raising security concerns and fueling conspiracy theories. Well, in a televised statement, the US President-elect Donald Trump has urged the US military to inform the public about what's going on.
The government knows what is happening. Look, our military knows where they took off from. If it's a garage, they can go right into that garage. They know where it came from and where it went. And for some reason, they don't want to comment. And I think they'd be better off saying what it is. Our military knows and our president knows. And for some reason, they want to keep people in suspense. I can't imagine it's the enemy, because if it was the enemy, they'd blast it out. Even if they were late, they'd blast it. Something strange is going on. For some reason, they don't want to tell the people, and they should, because the people are really, they happen to be over Bedminster. Want to know the truth? They're very close to Bedminster. I think maybe I won't spend the weekend in Bedminster. I've decided to cancel my trip.
The US President-elect Donald Trump speaking there, while responding to the reported drone sightings. The Department of Homeland Security, the Federal Aviation Authority, and the Department of Defense released a joint statement saying that the FBI has received more than 5,000 tip-offs, from which 100 leads have been generated. Well, advanced tech and expert visual observers have been reportedly sent to the region. Well, the agencies report that the sightings are a combination of lawful, commercial, hobbyist and law enforcement drones, as well as mistaken identifications of aircraft, helicopters and stars. Well, the authorities are reiterating that the drone activity to date does not pose a national security or public safety risk. Well, as the number of sightings continues to grow, some elected officials and mayors are left with little to no information to share with their constituents. Local authorities are reportedly uninformed, while a lack of answers from federal officials has left many frustrated. Well, from the Mine Hill Township in New Jersey, where there have been multiple drone sightings, I'm joined now by the mayor, Sam Morris. Thank you so much for joining us, Mayor Morris. For our viewers who don't know much about Mine Hill Township, it's in Morris County, New Jersey, got a population of around 4,000. Do correct me if I'm wrong. But tell me, what's the mood there like now?
The mood is unsettled. Since this started a month ago, the mood has been, there are people who are very blasé about it. Not everyone is upset and very stressed, but, there are also a lot of residents who are very distressed about it. They're very upset. It's causing emotional concerns for them. People do not like unknown things flying over their head. We understand we have a regulated airspace in this country, all countries. We understand planes are up and that planes can crash and things like that. But it's the unknown that makes you very uncomfortable. And that's what has people concerned right now.
Yeah, and you yourself have been out with your camera or your smartphone, I don't know which, doing some filming. We can look at some of the pictures you've filmed. There is your own video footage. I mean, as you've filmed what we're looking at now on our screens, and we're looking at what appears to be a football pitch with some lights. I mean, they are hard to show on television, I have to admit, but they are there. We can see them. I mean, what was going through your head as you filmed that?
Shock and surprise. I was notified that evening by a resident that lived right. That was over our municipal complex, where our school and our town hall and fields and all are. And was notified by a resident that there were drones over the area, and I came around here and shot that footage myself. It was, took a minute to get oriented, but you're watching the way they're moving. You're watching them that they're stationary. That same evening, my wife had a drone go over her car, which she was very uncomfortable about. She called me very upset. But it's while you take people seriously and you take people, you give people the benefit of the doubt until you see it for your own eyes and you see it in the way that I filmed it. There's always a little doubt in there, but now, it removes all doubt.
Yeah, I mean, you've just raised some really important points. First of all, I'm just wondering how large these objects are that are flying around in the skies above where you live. And just tell us a bit more about it, if you don't mind. What happened to your wife?
Well, people are reporting various sizes, but the ones that they get more attention, they're larger. I know I can tell you the one that my wife saw. She thought it was size of her car hood. Now, a commercial drone, are known to be that size. They could be 3 or 4 feet square, or a meter and a half square. But some people are reporting these things to be as big as a pickup truck or bigger. And that is, to have that over your head and not know what it is, and not know if it's regulated, and not know if it's friend or foe, that's a very concerning thing.
Yeah, I imagine a lot of people in the area have got their telescopes out trying to get a closer view of what these things are, because just a bright light on its own doesn't offer enough information. I mean, you hearing a similar sense of frustration and anxiety, really, from your fellow mayors in other parts of New Jersey and other parts of the United States?
Yeah, this all started, just to go back to one point, it's not the bright light, it's the movement. These drones have been working in a grid pattern. They go over an area and they go left and right, or north and south, or east and west, and they go in a pattern that you can see is programmed. It's not like, well, they just zip around and go in, any pattern. They have very specific scanning, it looks like they're doing. And that's what that's what the biggest thing that upsets people. Sunday week ago in the morning, I'm in a group of mayors in my county that we all kind of confer with each other on various issues and things that are going on. And we all decided to do a press release in the morning, and we decided to release a letter to our state's Governor Murphy that evening, just trying to stir things up to get somebody to talk to us. And within a couple of days, the state police had set a meeting with mayors. There were 250 mayors there. And since then, it's been a very active give and take, but not with a lot of detail or information, which is very disappointing.
Is this entirely new? Or, I mean, had you ever noticed anything like this before in the skies above your town? And do you think the fact that everyone's talking about it means everyone's looking at the sky and perhaps they're sort of paying more attention to what's flying around above them?
I think it's fair to say that 60-70% of these sightings are planes. We have several, it's New York Metro, we're an hour west. We have landing, pathways for Newark Airport, the New York City airports, other regional airports. But here's the thing, those are very definable. You can look to a certain point in the sky and see every minute and a half an airplane going into Newark International Airport. And you know what they are. It's a 737 descending to 2,000 feet, making approach, or the other airports. We all get that. We see those patterns. We understand that. But these are, when these things work in a grid pattern, or they seem to be programmed to go in certain directions for a length of time and turn back around or hover. Last Wednesday night, the night after I filmed, last Wednesday night, a week ago, not 2 weeks ago, I saw and filmed, but it didn't come out well, a drone that was hovering. And the drones have a red and a green light. One side is their left side, one side is their right side. And I saw a drone sitting and spinning. You could see the red and green lights alternating. But my video didn't come out very well, so it's not very usable. So those are the things that make people realize these are not airplane patterns.
Indeed, and people in your part of the United States know all about aeroplanes because, as you said yourself, you're near lots of airports. You're 50 kilometers from Newark, about the same distance from Central Jersey Airport. I mean, given that you do have these airports nearby, I'm wondering if you've got any other sites or targets in your area that might be the reason, the motivation for some drone surveillance going on above your heads there. I mean, are there some sensitive sites around there? There's Picatinny Arsenal, which is a weapons development center about 3 kilometers from where I'm sitting right now. They had flyovers. They put a press release that they had unidentified flyovers. There's other military installations here, but there are military installations everywhere. The one very strong question that's been asked for the last month is why New Jersey? It's a densely populated state. And the other thing too that I wanted to share with your viewers, these drones are not hiding. They come out about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, right? Daylight savings here, it's dark by 5. And they're out generally till 10 or 11 p.m. And they are very obvious. They're obviously obvious. Now, there are reports that, and I did see one myself one morning, I couldn't get my camera up ready, that they do go till daylight now, some of them. But why New Jersey and why are they being so obvious in the evening has been the two big questions that everyone's asking. Indeed. Before we crossed you, we heard the President-elect Donald Trump speaking. He's obviously got a property in New Jersey, in Bedminster, says he's probably not going to go there. He's also suggested that the US government is keeping Americans in the dark about these sightings. I mean, do you feel like you're being kept in the dark?
100%. I can tell you, after that White House briefing yesterday, the group of mayors that we text with, we have a texting group, frustration was over the top, why did they even take up our time? We got 2 hours notice for the meeting. The meeting started late. 3 mayors got to ask questions, and then they said, oh, we're out of time. It was incredibly frustrating. And look, and this is the other thing. Look, the average citizen here, the average person here, the average person around the world knows that the government does things on our behalf that they're not going to tell us, for security reasons, for military reasons, for safety reasons. Our police departments do things, and we don't know what's going on because they don't want us to, because it's not in the benefit of public policy. But what we're hoping for is that the FBI or somebody would level with us and say, look, we know what some of these are, and unfortunately, we're not going to tell you because for security reasons, right? And people can live with that. But it's the unregulated concept. We don't know what they are. We don't really think you're seeing anything. That is where it's incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, and all the while, and in the absence of concrete information, people are filling the void with conspiracy theories, some pretty outlandish ideas out there. Let me put one to you, perhaps not so outlandish, that someone here has tapped into a sense of anxiety nationwide. The country just had a very tense presidential election. There are a lot of drones whizzing around in America. I gather there are about 1 million registered drones. We don't know how many unregistered drones there are. Do you think someone's just cottoned on to the fact they've attracted a lot of attention? The media is watching. Here we are in the Middle East talking to you about it, and they just want to keep it going. This is their moment of glory, and they're having fun at the expense of the United States population.
Yeah,
what do you make of that?
The hobbyist, we'll call it the hobbyist drone community. I've spoken to people in that community. They find this this is anti-recreational drone use. They know that this actually could work very hard against their hobby and against this thing that they love, because if it leads to tighter regulation, if it leads to more rules, they're actually working against themselves. To kind of relate it into the president-elect's comments, there is something going on. It may not be to the extent. I mean, I personally know people have called me and said, "There's a drone out there. Go look." I go outside and I'm like, "Ma'am, it's a plane going into Newark Airport." The lady the other night was only because of her anxiety level, not because she's not a good person. Mayor, there's a drone right by the moon. I went out and looked and was like, "I think that's Venus." And she texted after she calmed down. She's like, "You know what? I think you're right. And I'm sorry." But that's what it's doing to people. Having something over your head unidentified is stressing people out. And the way that it started here, it started at near President Trump's golf course and home over there. Then it moved to the Morris County area, Picatinny, Morristown Airport. They were all over the place a month ago, 3 weeks ago. And now they're kind of dissipating and moving to other parts of this region. They're moving over the Delmarva Peninsula, Delaware, Maryland. South Jersey has got a lot now. So it's not something that's just, do I think a few hobbyists have jumped in? Yeah, they're probably having a little fun, but there's still real legitimate drone activity up there that's unexplained.
Sure, and I'm going to let you go, Mayor Morris, but just to wrap it up, I mean, you mentioned anxiety. Clearly there's a lot of fear. Do you think mass panic is an exaggeration in terms of the mood right now?
I wouldn't use the word panic. I would just use that anxiety, fear, people are upset. To me, panic would be something where people are going to take action. They're going to get in their car and go somewhere or something like that. I just think it's making people anxious. And there are other people it's not bothering at all. That's the truth, too.
Okay.
But generally, and it's not something people are getting used to. It's not getting easier with time. It's still staying pretty much in the forefront of a lot of people's minds.
Okay. Mayor Sam Morris in Mine Hill Township, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that's it for this special edition of Global News Today. Thanks for watching, and wherever you are in the world, if you're celebrating Christmas, we wish you all the very best.
From the White House to Gaza, Kyiv to Beijing, elections, economics and the environment compete with conflicts and other complex issues for our attention. In an age of fake news, deepfake and artificial intelligence,
they've got to have a vote and a say.
It's important to look beyond the loudest voice to understand the truth. From newsmakers to groundbreakers,
my campaign is going very well.
Presidents, prime ministers, princes and peacemakers, and cultural tastemakers.
As Arabs,